Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. І хто заводи, всяке озброєння, різні потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів. Робить примар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там пивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар. Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар. Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Байрактар.
Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer. I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, everybody. It's Enforcer Matt. Welcome back to the news of day 148.
And of course, with the beginning of day 148, we have now begun the 22nd week of the war. And of course, the Ukrainians always know how to start off the beginning of the next week properly, as we've gotten large news that a sizable Russian force has been encircled at the town of Vysokopillya. We're of course going to be covering that first thing tonight, which kind of brings us towards our schedule. But before we get to the schedule, we still have to bring up that we have a limited edition merch run on our store to support the Lee Spring Army. We have some Lee Spring Army merch, as well as coffee break merch. So far, it seems like people are really loving the Lee Spring Army merch, and a lot of people have been putting LSA in the chat non-stop. So I hope y'all get some. Of course, pretty cool, and it does help us to support this channel, which is, of course, helping us to keep these streams running. And so thank you once again to everyone who has gotten one, and I hope when y'all get them, that y'all enjoy wearing the Lee Spring Army on your sweatshirts, your t-shirts, your stickers, and whatnot. I don't think we actually have a sticker for the Lee Spring Army. I was thinking about the coffee break there, but still, pretty cool stuff. So make sure to go check it out. There's a link in the description below to the actual merch store, which you can then go to check it out. We don't plug merch in the middle of streams. We only do it at the beginning and the end. So this is the only time you're going to hear about it. And also, this limited edition merch run ends on Saturday at midnight. We never run merch during Sundays because that's our fundraiser and we want everyone focusing on those. So make sure to get some before midnight on Saturday. But without further ado, let's go over tonight's schedule because we have some really cool stuff to cover. And it's not just to kind of go over our main topics for the night, it's not just Vysokopillya that's been surrounded today. We've also gotten massive news that the British are going to be sending even more arms and aid to Ukraine in a very large portion. And we've also heard news of the famous, I guess you could say, A-10 Warthog maybe on the table to be sent to Ukraine in the future. There's nothing confirmed about that at the moment, but of course we're going to be covering that here in a minute. So without further ado, let's just get straight into the schedule. Starting off, we're going to be covering the Vysokopillya news first. After we cover that news, we'll then be moving down into the Kherson front line as a whole, as well as the Mykolaiv area and the Skadovsk area, covering this in one large group. After we do that, we'll then be moving across the seas immediately to the United States, and covering the news there. And after we cover the A-10 Warthog news, we're then going to be moving back to the United Kingdom to cover the news of the massive support here, as well as the Scottish news that we kind of got. It was just really something cool to see. After we cover all of that news, we're then going to start moving towards Russia. But before we get to Russia, we're going to take a quick pause to answer 3 questions from the chat. And after we answer those 3 questions from the chat, we'll then move on into the Russian news and our location unknown news. After we cover those 2 bits and also this little bit of information from the Hostomel airport, we've gotten new footage from February 24th today, which we're going to show on stream. We'll show that, and then that will bring us into our last segment, which will be the, I guess you could say the Donbass segment, which will include Lysychansk, Donetsk, as well as the Balaklia Izium area. But before we get there, we're of course going to take another quick pause to answer 3 more questions from the chat. We'll then cover that last remaining segment of news, as well as President Zelensky's speech. Surprise, surprise, I have been able to find the one that had the English subtitles on it where y'all can see it. So, y'all are going to listen to me go reading Rainbow again on President Zelensky's speech and read it off for y'all. I actually had someone say, why don't you just offer the mouse? The reason why is because that's really annoying and I'd rather just read it off. So, without further ado, now that we've gone over the schedule, let's get straight into the news tonight and start off with the biggest news that we've ever heard. Now, the Ukrainians taking villages is something that we have seen before. Just in case if y'all have not, just in case if y'all's memory does need to be jogged, they did retake a large portion of the northern part of the country, in fact, all of it, earlier on in the war. They've also taken a decent amount of towns around the Kharkiv area, including Ruska Lozova, Ruski Tishki, Tirskuni, Stary Saltiv, Ternova, and many others. You can see them here, Paramoha, Shestakove, and all of these sorts of villages. They've also been able to do that in a couple of places here in the Mykolaiv area, but it hasn't been as surprising as an encirclement. This has actually never happened over the course of the entire war, where Russian forces have been encircled, and today is the first day ever where Russian forces have actually had the bag pulled over them, have not been able to withdraw, and have ended up being surrounded in one of the towns that they held. Also, just in case if y'all realized, this little video, well, this little front line here, I just saw someone say video in the chat, that's why I said that. This little front line here has had a little bit of an adjustment. If y'all may have remembered yesterday, the front line actually extended from Velika Oleksandrivka down towards Chuchani, kind of in a line that was a bit of a slant. We actually got enough information today to show that although we had video evidence and decent assumptions to assume that the front line had been pushed back that far, it in fact had not been, and the front line had extended around 5 more miles north towards the village of Vysokopillya. but it doesn't really matter, as the Ukrainian forces conducted a surprise attack today on that area of the front lines, overwhelmed the flanking forces around the village, and have managed to encircle it in its entirety. Now, we didn't have any video or picture evidence to back this up, and this is kind of the problem we're starting to run into in the Kherson area, and I think we're going to waive one of our rules about picture and video evidence here, because it's starting to hinder us on reporting on anything in this area because of the media blackout that's been instilled by the Ukrainians and the lack of news coming from the Russians. So we actually had to outsource this today to a Ukrainian news site that's largely been trustworthy so far as I've seen, and they showed a news article showing us the exact movements that the Ukrainian forces made to surround the village. You can see right here, there's the town of Vysokopillya, and you can see here that there was a I guess you could say a pincer maneuver, I guess is the best way to say it, that came from Olegino and also the village down here. I'm not going to try and pronounce that one. And they both met to the south of the village and have completely encircled it. We don't know how many Russian forces are within that village, but based on the marker here, it looks like they're trying to give us the idea that it may be something similar to a BTG size, which would be around 800 soldiers. And so today alone, we may have seen 800 Russian soldiers, or an entire BTG or more, being encircled by the Ukrainians in the Kherson area, and as the next days unfold, we may see a large amount of soldiers surrendering as they will be cut off from their supplies, running out of ammunition, food, and the like. It's huge news. Sorry for the voice crack there, but it is massive news, and it may be showing us that, in fact, the Ukrainian counterattack had not actually happened at this point, and it may be occurring now or soon. It seems like the window here is when the counterattack is actually happening is getting a little bit foggy, because I also listened to President Zelensky's speech today before the stream, and he was saying that there's a potential for massive progress in the south, but the way he worded it sounded like the counterattack hasn't actually even started with what we've seen today. And so it seems like all of these actions may be preludes to the counterattack, and when you look at it all, it does make a little bit of sense. But of course, we don't really weigh into Ukrainian movements and plans all too much. I hate that, because it really cuts out a lot of what we can talk about now, considering that it's kind of been put into Ukraine's court to push the Russians out of the country in certain areas, especially the Kherson area. But of course, we don't want to give away anything that can get anyone harmed or killed. So moving out of the Vysokopillya area, which is massive news, and I hope to see this little circle disappear over the next few days or a week or two, we're now going to move down to the Kherson front in general, where we have gotten a little bit of unfortunate news today that an M777 was hit and appeared to have been destroyed by the Russians on film. Here we can see a towed artillery piece being moved behind what appears to be a flat front vehicle that the Ukrainians are using. There's not a lot of flat front trucks that the Ukrainians are using beyond the Oshkoshes, and so while we can't really make out the outline of the M777 all too well, the shape of the truck kind of denotes that it must be an M777. We can then see the M777 get hit incredibly close by an artillery piece. And we see that the vehicle has come to a dead stop, which means that it may have been damaged enough, or the crew may have been injured, where the vehicle couldn't continue. It's a little bit of unfortunate news, but we do know that by and large the Ukrainians have secured the initiative in this area, and these losses are of course always just going to exist whenever any kind of war is going on anywhere. There's no such thing as taking 0 casualties. This isn't Saving Private Ryan even had casualties for the Americans. So it's just a war. It's not really an unfortunate thing. The Ukrainians have around 120 of them, and so seeing one of them maybe be lost is not too bad of a thing. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news further down the line, where we can see Ukrainian medics hard at work dealing with wounded soldiers that have just endured an artillery barrage. And in fact, the medics had to endure it as well before they got to the soldiers. And so here's the video of the brave Ukrainian medics hard at work like they've been through the entire 148 days of this war, entering into the 22nd week and showing no signs of stopping. Here's the video. You can see them getting barraged, and the medics have taken shelter what appears to be under the vehicle, or right behind it. Well, it's right behind it on the ground. They're now getting inside of the car, starting it up, and they're on their way. They're now taking off as fast as they can. looks like they picked up a pretty decent amount of speed, and it looks like they're trying to get to a unit that would have wounded soldiers in it. As you'll see in the clip, they eventually make it to the unit. They now get out of the vehicle. They're now running down into the brush, where we see that a soldier has appeared to have taken a small shrapnel wound.
Поехали быстро туда. Не, стой. Надо глянуть. Чекай, Саша.
Medic is now searching for either some scissors or some gauze.
Сильно меня ранило.
Надо вести. Надо вести.
Да, сейчас. Давай быстрее. Давай машину, поехали.
We can now see the medic stripping off the armored vests of the soldiers.
Тихо, я сейчас загляну, чтоб... Тихо. Дальчина, да. Сейчас, давай, стой, надо наложить это.
Быстро накладываем.
Лежи, у тебя рука.
Блядь, рука, спина и, блядь, и нога. Выход, блядь. Юра, спустись ниже. Скорую вызывать надо сейчас, блядь.
Блядь, давай.
Останови кровотечение.
Тихо.
Оно не сильное, нормально. Сейчас он остановит. Нормально.
You can see that he's taken a couple of little punctures here, and they are bleeding a little bit, but it doesn't look
Зацепило.
like it's
Сейчас быстро
too
остановим.
bad of wounds. It looks like something that could be addressed pretty quickly.
Да.
Саш, все хорошо.
Все, Сань, нормально, да.
На вылет один. На вылет, блядь. Тихо. Саша. Выход. Так, Юра, опустись ниже.
Да, я ниже, дружок.
We now see them dressing the wounds.
Блядь, не, у тебя на выход. У меня нога, блядь, еще очень болит, сука. Нету крови там. Вот здесь.
As they say in the famous Monty Python movie, in The Search of the Holy Grail, it's just a flesh wound. Lucky for the Ukrainians, as they got through that artillery bombardment pretty okay.
Так, они садятся тут, я в кузов.
You now see them making their way back up to the truck and hopping back in.
Не, Юра, ты седаешь сюда.
So with that's the end of the video, and it's great to see that the Ukrainian medics were very quick at getting into action to take care of these soldiers, and luckily, the wounds were minor, and so it looks like all it required was a bit of a bandaging, hopefully a little bit of a, I guess you could say a little clot forming there, so that way there will be a scab, and eventually it will heal with time. Luckily for them, it wasn't anything too severe, and could be taken care of pretty quickly. Moving further on down the front line, we have then seen that the Russians have been hit by the Ukrainians in the Kherson area. Of course, we believe it's by the 28th Brigade, but usually whenever we see any activity by the 28th Brigade, they always put a little watermark of their brigade patch somewhere in the corner of the video, and we don't see that here, so we don't know which unit this is attached to, but it was in the Kherson area. And so, here's the video. We see the Ukrainians looking out in the distance to a tree line, and now clicking the play button, much like I did, and now the artillery is landing down into the small line of trees here. We can see that apparently they have hit something because dark black smoke is starting to billow out of the tree line, which usually means that a vehicle just got hit. Well, you now see one of the Russian vehicles trying to make a break for it and moving as fast as they can across the field to the next tree line. And it looks like two vehicles, actually. You see two separate pillars of smoke in there are burning, and now we see the smoke turning somewhat white. We now saw a second Russian tank. Not only the first one, the second one also panicked and began to floor it across the field to the next tree line to try and get away from where the Ukrainian artillery is already firing. We now see the drone looking around, getting bored with the usual slaughtering of the Russians, and now trying to see what else is going on out there. And just notice how flat Ukraine is, especially in this Kherson area. It is literally a plain. Now you see the fire has certainly brewed up. It may have spread to the trees, And now it looks like the fire is just all out of control. We have some white smoke, some black smoke, so it seems like artillery's, ammunition is exploding in there, along with the pieces and the vehicles attached to the ammo, I guess you could say. That's the end of the video, but once again, a pretty nice sight to see that the Ukrainian artillery is still taking care of Russian units in the area. And speaking of which, while we don't have actual news to cover this, I have been looking around on the internet and trying to read up on that Antonovsky bridge and the condition of it after the artillery bombardment that we saw on film last week, and it does seem that the damage has been significant enough to be able to stop heavier vehicles from crossing that specific span of the bridge, which is a very smart thing by the Ukrainians. This bridge, rather than the one in Vysokopillya, is the only way that Russian forces can be supplied west of the Dnipro River. And so now the Ukrainians have destroyed pretty much the only river access that the Russians had in the south, and now all Russian supplies, if they are to try and make it to Kherson, will have to travel from the north near Vysokopillya. This is good news, and also another interesting thing that I was seeing was that they have not destroyed the Russian route of, the Russian, I guess you could say, path of retreat in a way, because while the bridge has been damaged enough that heavy vehicles cannot cross, soldiers can still cross this, and light vehicles can as well. We have seen some civilian cars on film still crossing over the damaged span, showing that it can carry that kind of weight. And so what we're most likely going to see is that the Ukrainians are going to try and push the Russians across the river. The Russians will have to leave all of their equipment behind because, of course, it won't be able to cross. And we're going to almost see a Dunkirk situation where the British Expeditionary Forces had to evacuate the beach and leave behind all of their equipment. And the Russians will pretty much have to do the same at Kherson, crossing the bridge and leaving behind almost all of their heavier equipment, maybe even going as far as leaving some of the heavier trucks behind that are on the other side of the river. We're not entirely sure if the truck's weight can be supported on the bridge. If so, they will definitely try and get as many of the trucks across because those are as valuable as a tank and even more so now. But then again, that's kind of the condition that the Antonovsky bridge is in, which is good news. That means that the Kherson garrison is mostly going to start running out of ammunition within the next week or the next few weeks. Now with that, we're now going to move behind the lines to a last bit of news where we saw a crab on the move. Now, usually when someone gets crabs, they usually stay in one place, and we all know where the crabs stay. But as you can see in Ukraine, the crabs in fact move. And in fact, not just move, they move through sunflower fields, which this is the first time I've seen a sunflower field in Ukraine. Golly, that thing is actually kicking it. I know you can see this, man. Look how fast they're driving. It's like 40 miles an hour.
Man, that thing is falling.
I didn't actually know a crab could pick up that kind of speed, especially on what appears to be like a packed dirt road. Like, they're putting that thing through the rigors right now, moving it that fast. But what a neat video, and it is cool to see that the Polish crabs are starting to pop up all over the place. And really, we are seeing a whole lot less of indigenous Ukrainian artillery pieces from Soviet times, and it almost seems now that the entire artillery core, or, well, yeah, I guess the best way to call it is the artillery core of the Ukrainian army is comprised of Western systems almost entirely now. We see Caesars, M777s, Crabs. Let me think of what else they've been sent. I think they've been sent some little M119s from the British. I'm not really sure about that, though. They've been sent M109s. They've been sent Panzerhaubitzes. I mean, like, they've been sent everything under the sun. They have this massive array of weapons, and honestly, logistically, that must be a massive headache to try and get parts to keep them running. But it's really interesting to see that they are starting to modernize before our very eyes, and as the war continues, we're not seeing any normal post-Soviet SPGs. They're almost all Western like this crab. With that, we're now going to be moving behind the lines before we move to Mykolaiv to the town of Skadovsk, where y'all may have remembered that a ammo depot was hit by a HIMARS missile attack. Now, we didn't see some footage that night, but we did get some footage following up, which we'll show here, that the Russians actually attempted to shoot down the HIMARS missiles before they could hit the ammo depot with their own surface-to-air missiles, and of course, it was ineffective. But here's the video of this short little battle in between the HIMARS missiles, the movable force meaning the stoppable objects. And so here's the video of those HIMARS missiles making it through the surface-to-air missiles. You can see the surface-to-air missiles firing from the ground, trying to intercept the HIMARS missiles as they fly into the town. and exploding, but we know how this story ends. The missiles, in fact, hit their targets and destroyed the ammo depot. The camera's now looking at the little glitter of what I can't really tell you exactly. I don't know what that glittering is coming from. We can now see them looking at the horizon. And we can hear the sounds of what we can assume was the surface-to-air missiles exploding. And everything fell quiet. We know that the end of the story showed, of course, because we saw it just a couple of days ago, the ammo dump was hit and it exploded spectacularly, letting us know that thousands of tons of Russian ammunition most likely went up in a large ball of flame. So pretty much just a revisiting of that story, and it adds a little bit more drama to it than we originally believed. I actually thought the entire time that the Russians most likely had no way to counter the HIMARS missiles, but we can see here that they could at least put up a feint or an attempt to try and shoot them down with their own SAM batteries. So very interesting to see, didn't know that was possible, and now we can see that the Russians may try, but in this instance they certainly failed. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the area of, let me make sure I get the name right, Skadovsk, and we're now going to be moving up to Mykolaiv, where of course we've seen Russian missile attacks occur once more on the city. Western surface-to-air missile defense systems could help to prevent these attacks, but sadly we haven't heard any news of any being sent over as of right now. We can see one of the impacts right there. Of course, we do not have any casualty numbers as of the moment. Usually when these attacks happen, there is always a casualty report that comes out a day or two later. We do not have that at the time, but it's safe to assume that almost every single Russian missile attack like these has resulted in civilian casualties. A bit of an unfortunate video to see, and hopefully the Ukrainians in the future will be able to finally get those missile defense systems that they've been asking for some time, and be able to protect these Ukrainian cities and the entirety of the nation from these vicious terrorist attacks that they've pretty much become. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the southern front. We know that the Ukrainians are conducting offensives. Obviously, at this point, they've now surrounded a town, but we don't know how much farther they've gone beyond that. This is the only verifiable frontline news we've been able to get today. We haven't heard of any advances anywhere else along the front lines, but I'm hoping that all of these combined actions that we've seen by the Ukrainians over the past week is setting themselves up for an impressive counterattack. I honestly think it's going to go quite well. We're seeing a lot of the lead up to what I would consider to be a successful counterattack. Not going to get into too many details, but as far as, you know, my little armchair general side of things go, they're checking all the boxes that I would have checked off before an actual counterattack would begin. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the southern front, and we're now going to be moving to the good old US of A. We've heard today a little bit of a... It's kind of a tough thing to actually say with certainty how to word this. It's not confirmed that they're going over, but it's at least on the table. It's not been taken off the table, I guess would be the best thing to say. The United States Air Force has said that there is a possibility that they will send A-10 Warthogs to Ukraine because they're planning on retiring around 22 of them. This little news article here speaks of it. I checked this with multiple sources. Apparently this was said at some kind of an arms expo or arms convention, where the Secretary of the U.S. Air Force, Frank Kendall, did not outright reject the idea of transferring A-10 Warthogs. The article then goes on to talk about the A-10 Warthogs being retired. The Air Force is kind of moving away from using them. They're saying that the wars of the future that the United States sees themselves fighting will not necessarily need the A-10, and it's starting to lose its cutting edge that it used to have over the prior wars that we found ourselves in, like Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it seems that they're trying to retire around 21 of them, and they may be trying to earmark those, since the Air Force will no longer have a use for them, to go to Ukraine and be used by the Ukrainians. Now, I think that this is pretty cool, and I think that if it's possible, of course, we should send these over to help them out. But one thing I would like to keep in mind is that a lot of people put too much emphasis on the 30mm cannon within an A-10 Warthog. Yes, it's cool. Yes, it does make a cool sound, but based off of ballistics tests back when the Gau Avenger cannon was actually being tested for the first time in the 70s, the gun was actually a little underperforming. It could not puncture through the armor of an M47, which is a tank that the United States used during the 50s, I guess you could pretty much say. And so in that regard, it's usually used on softer targets like trucks, soldiers, people, things like that. Things that can actually be shredded up by a 30mm, but it's not a be-all, fix-all kind of gun. So while it would be nice to see, I think the A-10 Warthog would be more fitting in a role to actually be used for all of its hard points, which we can see whenever you look at one. I'll actually show you all that real quick. You can see the gun here, and everyone always oogles and boogles over the gun. But the thing is that this gun is not really the shining factor of an A-10 Warthog. It's these little pieces on the wings. And some of you all who may not know what these are called are like, what are they? And they're called hard points. Hard points are these pylons, which are installed under the wing, which you can attach all kinds of weapons to. You can attach unguided bombs, guided bombs, you can attach Mavericks, you can attach really anything and everything. The Army made, well, the Air Force made these incredibly modular, and so anything that you can imagine can usually be fitted onto an A-10 Warthog. I believe it has around 11 hard points, if I remember correctly, so it can carry a large amount of, say, ordnance. And on top of that, the A-10 has an incredible loiter time. The problem is, though, is that loiter time is, of course, wonderful when you're dealing with countries that can't really counter you in terms of air supremacy, but with the Russians having S-300s and S-400s, there is a little bit of a problem that that loiter time may be to its disadvantage. It may be shot down if it was to loiter for too long. Also, the speed of the A-10 is also a little bit of a problem as well. It can only go around 400 miles per hour at cruising speed, and that's compared to the Su-25 that's already being used by the Ukrainians and the Russians, which has a cruising speed of around 600 to 620 miles per hour. Regardless of that, it does have a pretty good service history. It has been largely effective, and I believe that if we sent these over, it would be a decent amount of help to the Ukrainians. Also, just a little aside in military history, this AH-56 Cheyenne is actually really impressive, and I highly suggest y'all pull that up and read on it if you're a little bit of a military history enthusiast, because this thing could have done the job of the A-10 Warthog and the Apache pretty much all in one fell swoop, according to its testing. But due to some political issues in between the Army and the Air Force, which is pretty much the Treaty of Key West, this thing could not be implemented into Army service because it was pretty much so good that it would practically put aircraft at the time out of commission. But that's a whole other aside, just a little interesting tidbit there. Anyways, huge news by the Air Force, and I hope that they actually send these over in the future, because if they did, then of course would help the Ukrainians to bolster their positions in the country and hopefully push the Russians back. With that, we're now going to be moving to the city of London in the United Kingdom, where we've heard that the British government will be sending over more supplies to the Ukrainians. Of course, with political events, we do rely on articles, because there's really no other way to get this information. But according to the United Kingdom's government, they'll be sending scores of artillery guns, I'm assuming that these will be the M119s, hundreds of drones to counter the Iranians potentially sending over around 130 of them, and 50,000 rounds of artillery ammunition, supposedly, and more anti-tank weapons to Ukraine in the coming weeks. This is not something that's going to be happening in months. This is going to be occurring within weeks. We can, of course, click on the article, which brings us to the UK Defense Journal, which talks about this in a little bit more detail. We can see they go over the numbers of what's been sent over so far. And we also seen, and I never heard about this, and I don't know if y'all heard about this either, apparently 6 Stormer vehicles were sent over to the Ukrainians to support their, I guess you could say, surface-to-air missile batteries, which had never really been talked about, and we never really heard that until this article came out. But that's a story for a whole other time. The Stormer is like the British version of their surface-to-air missile defense systems. Anyways, great news to hear from the British. It's, of course, wonderful to hear that support is continuing, even during politically unstable times within the United Kingdom, when we're starting to see an inevitable change of prime ministers. It appears that support will still be unwavering for Ukraine, and that the British will certainly be an ally of the Ukrainians until the end of this war. Moving on out of London, we actually have a really cool scene to show y'all inside of Scotland. It was a little video, and of course, being a bagpiper, and I've heard a lot of people asking me to drop a bagpipe mixtape, which we might in the future, we have seen the Ukrainian anthem being played on the bagpipes in Scotland and being accompanied by African drums. It's a very cool little scene, and of course, here's the video. Now, just in case for those of y'all who are curious, some of y'all may be asking, Enforcer, have you ever worn a kilt and also a uniform like that? And funnily enough, I actually wore the exact same uniform on the exact same tartan on it. And just to clear something up real quick about Scottish culture, a lot of people get tartan, plaid, and kilt confused. Plaid is not really the design. It's actually this thing on top of the uniform here. You can see it kind of crossing over his chest, kind of like in a sideways crossbelt kind of style. That's what's called a plaid. That's the piper's plaid. It wraps all the way around your chest. It's pretty tight, and on top of that, it's super heavy if you get the heavyweight version of the wool. The tartan, however, is the actual design that's on the kilt and also the plaid. So just wanted to clear that up for a second, just in case for those of y'all who are interested about Scottish history. But with that, that's the end of that neat little video, and it's cool to see that support for Ukraine is overwhelming still in Britain, and that people are playing the Ukrainian anthem in the streets. And also we see a little combination of cultures here, all supporting Ukraine. And so cool to see, and with that, we're now going to be moving out of the British news, and we're now going to be moving over to Russia, which, of course, everyone always looks forward to hearing what the Russians have to say. But before we get there, we're, of course, going to answer 3 questions from the comments, and then after we answer those 3 questions, we'll then move on into the Russian, location unknown, and Kyiv news.
All right, and first up, we have a $50 super chat from Blue Flam 777, who says, I bought a shield when I was in Russia. Unfortunately, I had to throw it out because it was just a Putin. Slava Ukraine.
I think I get the idea of, well, the punchline in that joke. It kind of threw me off guard a little bit, and that's why I laughed. But thank you so much for the support. And if he really did buy a shield in Russia, that is kind of cool. I don't know what kind of shield it would have been. I'm guessing it would have been from like the Kievan Rus times, you know, or at least a replica of it. But I thank you so much for the support and sharing that little story with us. And if it was just a joke for the punchline, still a pretty good one. And so with that, thank you once again for the support. Of course, thank you for helping us to keep running this channel. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on, we have a $30 super chat from White Lightning 777, who says, is it socially acceptable to visit West Ukraine, maybe Lviv, as a tourist during wartime?
To answer that question, that's a little bit of a one that kind of depends on who you are. To some people it would be, to some people it wouldn't. Honestly, I would say yes, it supports the Ukrainian economy because that's foreign money coming into their country, and while it may be a small amount, it's still an amount being pumped into their economy and helping it to stay more stable. On top of that, if y'all don't know, Bald and Bankrupt has returned to Ukraine after he was caught in Kyiv during the initial invasion, and he apparently traveled to the border of Ukraine and I believe it was Russia or Ukraine and Belarus again, which honestly this time I don't find that to be smart considering it's wartime, but you know, guy's got to make videos. He makes videos going to dangerous places and doing somewhat dangerous things, so you know, I guess that is what it is, but still it would support the Ukrainian economy to travel over there, and while wars necessarily aren't viewed as the best time for tourism, it would help out the Ukrainian tourism industry to keep alive. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, White Lightning 777, and thank you once again to support to this channel. And with that, thank you, and we're on to the final question of this question segment.
And the final super chat of this segment goes to Kaltenberg, who puts in a $20 donation and says, Christmas in Moscow, LSA.
Well, thank you very much for the support. And can you reread that one again real quick for me?
They said Christmas in Moscow, LSA.
And I thank you once again for the support. Of course, it is Christmas in Moscow. I think it's more Christmas in the way it's cold, snowy, and kind of a little depressing. Have you ever seen the winter in Russia? It doesn't have the same kind of feel to the winters in Western Europe. It's not like this cheery little time where snow's on the ground, Christmas markets are open. In Russia, it's always snow's on the ground, everything's built in a gray color, and now there's white all around it. So you have this dreadful looking, like, gray life you live in. The snow's white. Well, sometimes it can be a little gray. The clouds are gray and the buildings are gray, and it just looks kind of sad and depressing. So with that, I thank you so much for the support. I guess you could say it's Christmas in Moscow with that kind of dreary imagery in mind. And with that, thank you once again.
And Enforcer, before we move on from this question segment, I wanted to address the poll that I put up 10 minutes ago. And the question was, do you believe that the A-10 Warthog is antiquated? It looks like 55% of you said that no, it is still effective. 21% said yes, it is becoming ineffective. And 24% said not really, possibly, or maybe. So interesting results, but I have to say, the A-10 Warthog is one of the coolest looking aircraft I think I've ever seen. And it has saved many a soldier's life. So I would have to agree with the 56%. Really cool aircraft, and hopefully the Ukrainians can get trained on it pretty quickly.
That's a pretty interesting note, but unfortunately this time I'm going to have to disagree with the poll and kind of give a little bit of a counter statement. I know that a lot of people are fans of the A-10, but if you look into this operational history, like in Iraq and Afghanistan, usually they would send A-10s to areas of the front lines that had very little activity, much like they would send AC-130s to areas of the front line that had little activity by and large, so that way they wouldn't be at threat of being shot down. And some of y'all maybe think, well, if the Afghans didn't even have any kind of man pads or anything to shoot at aircraft at, what's the fear of them being shot down? Well, they fly so slow that if you have enough AKs trained onto an A-10 firing at it, you can actually run a pretty good chance of hitting it. It only flies at around 400 miles per hour, and if it's maneuvering and making turns and preparing to fire, it can fly even slower. So I know that a lot of people are fans of the A-10, and I do have to admit, it's one of the coolest planes that the United States has ever designed, but at the same time, its service history is a little bit, I guess you could say, counterintuitive. And on top of that, there was also a huge problem in the Gulf War where A-10 pilots had to carry around binoculars with them because there was really no other way to look at ground forces and identify who was who. And so they carry around these giant binoculars inside the plane. And if they're like, hey, I think we got some Iraqi, like armored units out in the distance, they would have to pull out binoculars while they were flying and look through them to try and see who was who and who was what. So it's a cool plane. I think it will help out the Ukrainians, but at the same time, I think that an F-15E Strike Eagle or an F-16 can do the job a little bit better, and of course, due to their speed and I guess you could say the lack of loitering time, it may be a little bit safer to run sorties with those kinds of aircraft. But then again, that's only my opinion, and everyone does have an opinion. There's never really a clear answer to this stuff. People also thought that the SBD-3 Dauntless was a obsolete dive bomber entering World War II, and then it managed to score more kills against the Japanese than any other aircraft used in service at that time. So, then again, it's just my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt, but that's kind of where I stand with the A-10. It's really cool, but I also feel like those kinds of aircraft with their slow speeds are starting to show in age. But with that, we're now going to be moving out of this question segment. If you have thrown in a super chat, we will answer all of them by the end of the night, and you don't have to pay to have a question answered. You can just throw one into the live chat, and we will answer those as well. And so without further ado, we're now going to move into Russia. Oh, gosh. And everyone knows what Russia's about. Usually it's something stupid, and today we got something stupid from Lavrov. And so here's Lavrov talking, and I'm going to have to interrupt him a lot because he says a whole bunch of stuff that just doesn't make sense. Also, I'll have to read it off to y'all because the subtitles will be cut off on the bottom row. So he says, "You see, when there was a meeting of negotiators in Istanbul, there was one geography. Our willingness to accept the Ukrainian proposal was based on that geography, the geography of late March 2022. You mean the DPR LPR? Well, that's about it. Now the geography is different. It's not only the DPR and LPR, it's also Kherson region, Zaporizhia region, and a number of the other territories, and this process continues consistently and persistently. As the West, in powerless anger, or in a desire to make the situation as much worse as possible, let's wait for pumps Ukraine with more and more long-range weapons. So I don't understand what the narrative here that this guy is trying to pump out to everyone is, because let's go back and look at that in a little bit more detail. The West, in powerless anger, gives them more and more long-range weapons, which seems that it's not really powerless anger, but it's having an effect on the Russians, and he just kind of admitted it within the statement. So it's like, can we not have contradicting statements in the same sentence? Maybe just try and say, you know, the West trying to destroy the Russians sent over more and more long-range weapons to Ukraine, instead of trying to make it sound like the puny West, who can't do anything to stop us, sent devastating long-range weapons to Ukraine. That's like a double negative. It cancels each other out. It doesn't make any sense. These HIMARS, already Reznikov boasts of them, they already got 300-kilometer missiles. So the challenges geographically will move even further from the current line. And so what he's trying to say here is that because the West has given Ukraine the HIMARS, and the HIMARS are beating our butts inside of Ukraine, we're now going to continue the war on further and take more than the Donetsk and Luhansk regions and push out even further into the country and try and take more of it, so that we can have a protective barrier in between us and these nasty HIMARS. The problem with that, though, is that's supposing and going off of a story that the Russians have been fighting in the southeast of the country the entire time and had no other plans. The original outset of the war, Putin declared that they were going to denazify Ukraine, they were going to take over the country and depose the government, and then pretty much put one in charge that was suitable to Russia's interests. And so this hasn't even been what the Russians have been doing the entire time. They had a totally different war goal at the beginning, and now they've changed it, and they're acting like this has always been the war goal. Honestly, Matthew, this might remind you of 1984, where the enemy of Oceania was East Asia or Eurasia, and it would change almost weekly. And this is what they've done with the war goal, is that at the beginning, they were saying, our goal is to denazify all of Ukraine. And now they're saying our goal is to only liberate the Donetsk and, the Donetsk and Luhansk Oblasts, which is totally changed in concept. So, you know, the story here doesn't even make any sense, and it doesn't make any sense at all that apparently more devastating, deadly, and effective weapons have been given to Ukraine, and so the response to that, instead of trying to maybe slow down the war and end it, is to try and ramp it up and continue it on. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Because we can't allow the part of Ukraine that Zelenskyy will control to have weapons that will pose a direct threat to our territory. And so now you see the total 360 contradiction here. He said the powerless West, then talks about the long-range weapons, and now he clearly says that the weapons are potent and very dangerous to the Russians. And so how in the world can you make the West out to be powerless when they have weapons that are so dangerous to the Russians that now you have to declare we're going to take even more land in fear of these powerful Russian weapons? The whole entire story he's trying to make up doesn't make any sense. It has a lot of holes in it. And just with a simple bit of logic and contradicting statements, you can see that this is all BS. And the territory of those republics that have declared their independence and those that want to determine their future independently. Hey, wait a minute. Was that a subliminal flicking off right there? What do you
It
think?
could be.
Yeah, what's
Yeah,
up
it
with
looks
this?
like it actually.
Yeah, it looks just
Wow, that's
like
pretty
it.
bold.
Yeah, what do y'all think about that, chat? Because that looks like a flicking off right there. But with that, that's the end of the little speech from Lavrov, well, the little talk with Lavrov, which I find to be just stupid. He had a load of contradictions, and it didn't make any sense. And he sits there and says the West is powerless, but they give deadly weapons that are so dangerous to Russia, we have to take more land to protect ourselves. None of it made any sense. Of course, the typical kind of Russian stupidity we see. And when you just see that the Russians are all over the place at this point, trying to come up with a reason why the war has continued. Now they're even dropping the premise that the war is to liberate the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. Now they're saying we're trying to create a buffer zone in between us and the HIMARS weapons. And, you know, it doesn't even make any sense at this point. I bet y'all can all see that. So I'm not even going to go any further on it. It's just a pitiful grab at trying to justify the war still to the Russians. And so with that, we're now going to move out of Russia and away from that stupidity. And we're now going to move into Ukraine, where we can see the results of that stupidity and what it's leading to for the average Russian. Starting off, we can see Ukrainian peons in action. I was about to say peon, called myself and said peon. Unfortunately, cannot play the music, but it's still cool to see the peons moving around. These are some of the few indigenous Ukrainian artillery systems that are still in use this late into the war that we've seen on film. We can see them moving through the fields. This looks like a sunflower field, and we can now see them firing. It's still an impressive weapon to watch fire. I mean, like, just the sheer caliber of the gun. It's just impressive to see. And the recoil of the gun is so powerful, you can see it right there. It flips open all the hatches on the front of the peon, as you can see right there. You know, that's some... I think, honestly, that would be a hell of a thing to be near a gun that powerful as it fires. That's got to be something. We now see the aftermath of those shells hitting further down range, and it appears to be a montage of everything that the peons hit, and that looks like it was an ammo depot. We now see a battery of them firing. It appears that 2 peons are going to fire at the same time, and boom, boom. And hopefully those shells also went down range and hit the Russians dead on. With that, that's the end of that little video, but it's still cool to see that the Ukrainian peons are in action, although we're seeing a large amount of replacements coming in from the West, showing us that the Ukrainians are trying to westernize both their doctrine and their technology. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of Location Unknown news, where we can then see a rare, and I say rare, T-80 UK being hit by a drone bomblet. Just in case y'all didn't know, these are incredibly small in number. As far as we know, there's only around 15 to 30 T-80 UKs in the entire Russian arsenal, and we've already seen, I believe, 1 of them be captured, 2 of them be destroyed, and now we've seen the 4th one get damaged enough that it will most likely be abandoned. And on top of that, it appears that the tank has already been abandoned before this bomblet was dropped onto it. We can see the driver and gunner's hatch open, and it appears that, considering that 2 out of the 3 crew members are not there, the commander is most likely not in the tank as well. The bomblet falls right behind the turret, slamming through the little grates at the top of the engine bay, and most likely causing a moderate amount of damage to the engine. We didn't see a fire, but based off of where the drone bomblet hit, and also how weak the roof of tanks are in every part of the tank, we can assume that a decent amount of damage was done to the engine, and that this tank was most likely knocked out, where it either had to be dragged off the field and repaired, or abandoned, much like we've already seen in the video. So with that, another rare Russian tank knocked out right before our very eyes, and hopefully we'll see more T-80 UKs being destroyed as time goes on. In fact, this tank is so rare that I think the last time I tried to pull it up on the internet, it was very hard to find any specific information about the T-80 UK. But I'm going to check again real quick. T-80 UK. We want to find that variant. So let's scroll all the way down here. T-80 UK. So it was adopted into the Russian army in the 90s, but once again you can see that no number is given, and based off of public estimates of people trying to guesstimate how many there are, somewhere around 15 to like 30. So it's not a huge number whatsoever. And you can see, you know, the more common versions like the T-80 BVM, which we've hardly seen any of. The T-80 BV, which has been very common during the war. This one's at a military museum. And then we can also see, I would say the most common one in the war beyond the BV, the T-80U, which has been used a lot by the Russians, but as the war's gone on, we've seen them less and less. But with that, great to see another rare tank being knocked out. And with that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can see a very interesting time of contemplation. Now, we've seen Ukrainian Chechens fighting for Ukraine on the front lines, but what's interesting is that apparently, as we know, like President Zelenskyy is a Jew, the Jewish communities and the Muslim communities live in Ukraine pretty much in harmony, and we can see them kind of pondering the irony, these two soldiers pondering the irony and laughing at the fact that they're fighting side by side here in this video. Now, a lot of y'all may be thinking, well, why, Enforcer, why did you say that? Well, they did. And on top of that, if you ever look at the actual, I guess you could say, history in between the Jewish and the Muslims in the Middle East, it's never really been favorable. Just look, for example, in between Palestine and Israel and tell me that's a friendly relationship. And so with that, here's the video where we can see that a common Russian foe can unite them both. And so here is the video. I'm just going to let it speak for itself. They have a speech-to-text translation at the bottom of the screen.
Такого, отвечаю вам, такого вы еще не видели. Маджахед мусульманин и Зев, солдат армии Цахала, прячется, сука, в одном окопе. Алхамдулилля. Представьте, как русские нас допекли, что мусульмане, иудеи объединяются вместе, чтобы убивать этих гондонов именно.
Also, to add a little bit more context to this, because I didn't include this guy is Mujahideen, and just in case y'all don't know who the Mujahideen is, they're kind of the actual, quote-unquote, well, yeah, I mean, like, for the United States, it definitely were. They were the bad guys that we were fighting in Afghanistan, because it wasn't really the Taliban, it was more of the Mujahideen. Also, they were the ones who fought against the Soviet Union. And we see a Mujahideen Muslim also fighting alongside an Israeli Special Forces Jew. And we can see here that in this video, they're both kind of marveling at the fact that how the Russians had brought them together when at any other time in history or any other time outside of Ukraine, they would have been pitted against each other.
Представляете как?
Но они ошиблись в одном. Убить хотят они, а убьют их. Без раташа.
А вот кассета пошла по нам. Сколько? Метров 300, да?
Где-то около 50 плюс-минус.
Мы в зеленке, короче. Они проще.
Собаки ебаные, блядь. Я подтянул свой французский.
Короче, ложат градами по нам уже. Прощупывают зеленочку. Аллаху акбар, ла хауля ва ла куввата илля билля, ля иля илля. Нет мощи и могущества ни у кого, кроме Всевышнего Аллаха. О, Аллах, даруй нам победу над русскими свиньями. Друзья, никого и ничего в жизни не бойтесь, кроме Аллаха. Идите по прямому пути достойно. Идите по прямому пути достойно. Будьте мужчинами. Будьте мужчинами.
Занимайтесь спортом.
Мы здесь, потому что мы понимаем, что за нашими спинами украинские женщины и дети. И мы воюем против армии притеснителей, которые убивают ни в чем не виновных людей. Аллаху акбар. Аллаху акбар. Аллаху акбар. Конец связи. Иншаллах, мы еще не раз выйдем в эфир.
And with that, that's the end of the video. But what a weird and ironic fate where you would see a Mujahideen fighter as well as an Israeli Special Forces fighter fighting alongside each other inside Ukraine. Now, I actually did see someone trying to, of course, it's always someone, but they're trying to, of course, correct me about Afghanistan's history. And just in case you all didn't know, that was actually the first video this channel ever made. It's hidden now, it's unlisted, but I actually went over the whole history. Yes, I know that the Mujahideen formed the Northern Alliance, which then went on to become a different organization entirely before the United States entered. I do know all that, but still, just for historical simplicity, just for the explanation in this video, it's very interesting to see these two entirely different people culturally and religiously fighting alongside each other for the same common cause, which is to defend Ukraine and push the Russians out. So an incredible moment, I do have to say. It's very crazy to see, and I hope that even after this war, they are able to see that there is common ground amongst the both of them, and that they fought alongside each other to make sure that Ukraine would stay defended. With that, we're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news from that little interesting bit, where we can see that the Ukrainians destroyed a BMP. Apparently, according to the caption, a lucky one got away. We can see the ATGM being fired and the BMP in the distance. And boom goes the dynamite. The turret went flying, and then the other BMP, which we're about to see somewhere near the other one. Oh, wait, no. I'm sorry, not one got away as in a BMP. One of the crew members was lucky enough to get away. We can see him running away right there. So pretty lucky guy. Hopefully he turns himself over to the Ukrainians because the war will end for him if he does that. But still, an impressive bit of film, and it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out BMPs. We don't know if it was a BMP-1 or a BMP-2, but still, an armored personnel carrier was wiped out, another loss for the Russians, another kill for the Ukrainians. We're now going to be moving on to our next bit of location unknown news, where we can see the Russians once again using incendiary rounds in an unknown location on the front lines. With that, here is the video of the incendiary rounds, which look... It's always weird that these deadly and just very barbaric incendiary devices always look like some kind of a fireworks show that you would see on the 4th of July. It's just so weird to see that, because you would think that this would just be an impressive, like, pyrotechnic, but it's, in fact, incredibly deadly and very brutal in the way it kills people. And so here's the video. The Russians seem to love to use incendiary rounds. They've used them consistently ever since the first month of the war, and they just keep on doing it. And we keep on seeing videos of massive amounts of incendiaries being used, and I would actually like to know how badly, now of course we're not going to get this kind of information because this is important to the war effort, but how badly does this actually affect Ukrainian soldiers on the ground? Does this cause a lot of burn casualties? Does this cause a lot of burn fatalities? Because I would like to know that information, because of course, if soldiers are being burned to death by an incendiary, that's a war crime, and it would be good to get those kinds of figures and understand how deadly these kinds of incendiaries actually are, and how many people are suffering unfortunate fates at the hand of the Russians because they're once again committing blatant war crimes like we see right here. But with that, we're now going to move on from this video and into the next one, where we can then see a Ukrainian MiG-29 flying incredibly low over some Ukrainian forces. Now, I can't unmute it. It does have copyrighted music. I did check it. But we can see the MiG-29 right there, giving a quick little flyover. Pretty cool to see. And that thing is moving fast, probably around 600 miles per hour. Once again, I always love to see footage of aircraft flying from the ground. It's just a very cool thing, and it's good to know that the Ukrainian Air Force is still up there and still flying, and hopefully soon, within the next couple of months, we'll see American fighter aircraft now added to their roster, which will be even more effective than any aircraft they are fielding and flying right now. With that, we're now going to move on to the next bit of location unknown news, where we can then see a trophy BTR-82 captured by the Ukrainians just today. And so, here's the video of this BTR-82. I also saw someone ask a question in the summary video today that included this. What are the white bags? I'm assuming that they're sandbags to try and add a little bit of extra armor protection to the BTR, but that's only an assumption. And yes, they are sandbags. We can see the sand inside of them, so they're trying to use it for additional armor.
Освободитель. Вряд ли он вернется, конечно.
So oddly enough, and I have to make sure to point this out, there is no Z on this BTR-82, but at the same time, all Ukrainian vehicles we have seen in this war use the Ukrainian digital camouflage pattern. And so this appears, based off of what we're seeing, to be an unmarked Russian BTR-82, which is the first one we've ever seen in this war where they have not put an identifier on it, which is very bizarre. Also, another thing that gives us away is certainly a Russian vehicle, is that going into this war, I don't believe the Ukrainians had any BTR-82s or an incredibly large amount of them. And so, let me pull that up, BTR-82. Apparently they're calling it, that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for a BTR-82. There's a BTR-82. Did it not have a Wikipedia article on that? Someone's about to say, Wikipedia is not a reliable source. I know, but for the reasons of the stream, it is. BTR-82A, we'll put that in. Wow, they don't have a Wikipedia article for the BTR-82. Let's just scroll down and let's see if they include it as a variant. Let's see, Russia, and we have Colombia, Hungary, Romania. What about Ukraine? Ukraine has 350 BTR series vehicles. And you see that they have BTR-80s. And you see the camouflage being used here. This appears to be maybe a somewhat... Well, that's 2010, so this appears to be an older camouflage pattern that they had. But I'm trying to find some more information here on these BTR-82s, so that way we can make sure we are saying something correct when we say that the Ukrainians did not have BTR-82 going into this war. We're actually going to pull up the Ukrainian army inventory. Wait a minute, BTR-82... let's see here. BTR-82. Based off of what we're reading here, this BTR-82 pretty much started to go into service. The BTR-82 prototype was shown in 2009, so it is certainly an exclusively Russian vehicle, and that also gives us away as Russian. So we can now see the first time ever that a Russian BTR-82 or a vehicle of any kind was not marked with a Z while being in the theater.
Тут самый better.
See the camera moving around inside the tank. Looking through, I'm assuming, the gunner's sight. Once again, the filth. Look how nasty the inside of this tank is. It is gross. It looks like no one's ever cleaned it in years.
Там прицельчик видно, тут тепляк рядом. Жили, сука, что свиньи тут и курили, блядь, оно.
Golly. Russian tanks, Russian vehicles in general are in terrible condition.
Опа. Нихуя себе. Тангента.
Oh my gosh, man. I would be in a nightmare if I had to be in a tank that decrepit. That thing is so old looking. Like, golly. Like, every time I looked at tanks for sale online, because you can find them online for sale, I would look at them and be like, wow, these are in terrible condition, and they would be post-Soviet tanks. But surprisingly enough, they look like they're in great condition compared to what the Russians are actually driving around in the field, because this is just deplorable. And this is just a shame to the commanders of the unit. This is a shame to the enlisted soldiers that are operating these vehicles, that absolutely no care is being put into them. And I would suspect that these things are just on their last legs, their last breath of life, because of how bad they look on the interior. And if it looks this bad within the actual compartment, imagine how little care the mechanics are putting into this thing. I bet you they're actually throwing sawdust into the engine to try and keep it running. But with that, we're now going to move out of this video and into the next bit, the final bit of Location Unknown News, where we can see a short little video where some Ukrainian soldiers posed for a nice selfie in front of a burning Russian fortification in the distance. And so here's that video. You see them here all posing, cheering, raising their guns, and the burning Russian outpost right there, just about a mile away. Great little clip to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are taking a bit of, to have a little bit of fun. Also, another interesting thing is that these Ukrainians don't have any yellow armbands on, or armbands of any kind, which is kind of interesting. We've now seen an instance of the Russians not identifying their vehicles, and the Ukrainians not wearing armbands. Well, actually, we do see one right there. It's a green armband. With that, we're now going to be moving out of the location unknowns, and we're going to be actually backtracking a little bit to Kyiv, because we actually got some additional video footage from February 24th, 148 days ago now, of the attack on the Hostomel airport from the Russian VDV, showing us a little bit more of what happened there. And so without further ado, here's the video of the Russians, once again, trying to secure the Antonov airport on the very first day of the war. You now see the paratroopers moving down the way. Now they're running across the tarmac. There is the hangar where the Antonov 225 is at on the far right side of the screen.
Будка жидкая.
Now you can see them running towards the Antonov 225. And that's the end of the video. Now, I would like to take a second to actually talk about this entire Hostomel airport raid, I guess you could call it. We're going to pull up the Antonov airport because we've got enough footage now from the course of the entire day to get a very good idea of how this entire thing unfolded from the Russian perspective and also the Ukrainian perspective. And so, allow me to tell you all how we've seen this unfold. So, the Russians, of course, flew the helicopters in from Belarus. They flew over the Kyiv Sea, somewhere around Lysychansk, and they flew over here, over Bunker 536. Weird that that's marked. We'll look at that maybe some other time. And then they flew to the Antonov airport. They, of course, attacked the airport with rockets flying in. We heard that on film a long while ago. And then the helicopters landed right onto this tarmac right here. I guess you could call this the gate, if you'd like. And they dropped off the paratroopers. The paratroopers, which were somewhere in... Well, really, they dropped them off exactly right here. The paratroopers then got out, spread out, kind of like in a fan from where the mouse cursor is here to around right here, and then we saw them move forward to the hangar where the Mirio is, the Miria's hangar, and then also the second hangar on the right side. They then pushed the Ukrainians out of the buildings here. The Ukrainians, of course, seeing that their positions were kind of being overrun and there was too much of, I guess you'd say, an intermingling of VDV and their own forces, they decided to move out of the area so that way there wouldn't be a lot of fratricide going on and confusion, and then they regrouped on the southern side of the airfield here in Hostomel City itself. The VDV then had this little perimeter, and it didn't really control the entire airport. It only controlled, I guess you could say, the most southern part of the airstrip and the gate itself, which I guess is really the only part that matters of an airfield, but they didn't control the northern part of it, and that would have been crucially important, because if you didn't control the northern part, what's to say that the Ukrainians wouldn't just try and dice up any aircraft that would have landed from that direction? Anyways, they then held the airport for about the next 2 days, but they were getting slaughtered the entire time. The Ukrainians then pushed some attacks and artillery barrages on the Russians in this area, taking out the Antonov Miria, the Miria 225 around day 3. And then they finally pushed the VDV out of the airfield, pushed them into a route. It seems, based off of the video, the VDV routed straight up this tree line you can see here on the film. And then by that point, the Ukrainians held on to the airport for about a full day. And then finally, the Russians rolled back down. Of course, the main spearhead of the Russian assault coming from Belarus rolled down from the highway and then pushed the Ukrainians back out of the Hostomel airport, back through the Bucha-Hostomel European area entirely, and then back to the Zhytomyr highway right outside of Kyiv. And that's kind of how the entire battle occurred based off of what we've finally gotten from all of this video evidence. I think that we may try and make way in the future a special video about the assault on Hostomel Airport, because this has been the highest filmed and well-documented event of the war so far, and based off of all the video evidence we've been getting for hundreds of days at this point, you can almost clearly tell the story just from the video evidence alone. And I think we may try that in the future, because that would be a really interesting video to look at, and also it would be a deep dive into VDV strategies and tactics when doing an airborne assault like that. Anyways, that is the end of that video. That's the end of the story that we've kind of gotten as to how exactly they took the Hostomel airport in the first day and then lost it on the third. And with that, We're now going to move out of the Kyiv news, and we're now going to move into our last segment of the news tonight, which is entirely within the Donbass. But before we get there, we're going to take a quick pause to answer another 3 questions from the chat, and after we answer those 3 questions, we're then going to move on to cover the Donbass news and the speech from Zelenskyy. And so with that, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and first up for this question segment, we have a $50 super chat from Khalid Shihadi, who says, "It's nice to see you boys still at it. And thank you and have a great evening." And also, Enforcer, it looks like he plugged a military apparel store. I'm not sure if you want me to plug that live on stream, but I'll check with you first.
Sadly, we don't really like people to plug other channels and stores on stream. I appreciate your support, but at the same time, we don't really know anything about it. It's not really affiliated with the channel. But I do thank you once again for the support, Khaled, and I thank you for enjoying what we do. But just for reasons of our own, we would prefer not to say the name of the merch store on stream, but thank you once again for the support, and I hope that you have been enjoying the stream tonight, and we're very appreciative that you're going to help us to keep on running these, because without support from all of y'all, our viewers in the Lee Spring Army, these streams wouldn't be able to run. And so thank you all once again, and with that, we're going to move on to the next question, and thank you once again, Khalid, for the support.
And yes, thank you very much for the support. And moving on to the next super chat, we have a $20 donation from Michael Cabrera, who says, "Who will help rebuild Russia after it loses the war and collapses?"
Ooh, no one's really going to help rebuild Russia, because if you noticed that when the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, no one really came to help the Russians. Western businesses, of course, started to pour in because there was nothing stopping them from doing that. But no country stepped forward and said, we're going to help the Russians, because the Russians, of course, were still a nuclear power. They still are. And so in that regard, they can easily become a rival after you help them out. And so no one came forward to help them. And I think that in this instance, with the precedent being laid out, if the Russians collapsed, no one would come to help them again. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you very much once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one, and I hope that did answer your question fairly well, although it was a little bit of a short answer.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from DC Manik, who says, "What is your policy in regards to use of the Ukrainian patriotic anthem that you use at the beginning of your broadcasts? It's inspirational, and I would love to reuse it with other posts. With credit to the Enforcer, of course."
Do not give me credit. We actually don't know who made that video. That was made at the very beginning of the war, and I can actually show y'all where I found it on YouTube. It's called, let's see, Ukraine. Oh, look, the Enforcer streaming. Ukraine Anthem War 2022. And when you type that in, it'll take you to this video. And it was uploaded by Antrasis Posolnis Lituvoce. But when I asked him, because I actually went and asked him directly to make sure I wasn't doing anything to infringe on his video, I said, hey, is it okay if I use this video? He actually told me that he got the video from somewhere else and no one really knew who made the video. But you can actually pull up the video in its own right here. Ours actually had an English translation added onto it thanks to Mark Bohynchuk, which has been a longtime channel viewer. So if you wanted to find just the normal one, it's right there. And we don't know who to give credit to, so don't give credit to me, because it's certain, we've owned this thing for a long time and it has been our intro, but no one knows who really made it. And I wish we could find them and give them a lot of credit for it, because it's the most stirring patriotic rendition of the anthem along with the video footage that it shows. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. And I thank you once again for the support, and I thank you for the courtesy of saying you would plug us for that song and give us credit, but we don't even know who made it. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug, who says, "Lick the like button and go Ukraine. Yeehaw!"
And I thank you very much for the support, Junebug. And of course, if everyone would hit the like button, it helps out our streams a whole load into reaching more people. And also, if y'all go back and replay these streams after they're over at half speed, if you're, of course, just wanting to help us to reach more people, you could, of course, always do that. If y'all have not seen, there was a guy on YouTube who's broken the algorithm lately called Spiffing Brit, who told his viewers to play the video on 0.5 speed, and somehow that actually worked, and that video's gotten like 2.3 million views right now over the past day. Of course, we're not going to do anything like that. We're not a channel that's like, oh, look, we can exploit the algorithm. But still, if you would like to help us reach more people that would be interested in this news, of course, there are ways to promote this in the algorithm to, of course, let it reach more people. So I thank you once again for your support, Junebug. Hitting the like button is one of the best ways for us to reach more people. And so if y'all enjoy it and wish that y'all had found us earlier, make sure to hit that like button because it is the biggest help in letting us reach even more people. And so with that, thank you once again for being a longtime viewer, Junebug, along with Junebug72. Both of y'all have watched this stream for forever, it seems. And of course, we're highly appreciative of all of our longtime Leaf Spring Army veterans, and of course, everyone who helps us to run this channel. And with that, we are now moving out of this question segment. If you have sent in a super chat tonight, we will answer all of them. Do not fret whatsoever. We will answer every single one of them. And we'll answer as many live chats as we can as well. But with that, we now have to move into the Donbass region and also get to President Zelensky's speech. Moving past the Kharkiv area, which has had no activity to report, we did see a small indication of activity near the Balaklia area, where we saw the Ukrainians firing at the Russians with artillery. Here is the video. You can see them firing the artillery pieces here. Also notice the ACU. Ew. But anyways, camo is, of course, better than nothing. And it's good to see that this Ukrainian soldier does have camo, although it is the most hated ACU that the US came up with and used for a pretty good while. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this video, and we're now going to be moving further down the front line. We haven't really gotten any news beyond that from that area, and we haven't really gotten a lot of news from the Izium and Slavyansk area as well, but we did see that the Russians did bombard a school in the city of Kramatorsk, causing at least one death, and of course, the number of dead could climb over the next day or two, and it's, of course, unfortunate to see that another school has been hit. We can even see a Ukrainian textbook right here that says Ukrainska mova, and then something else in smaller text. Of course, unfortunate to see, it was a school being used by school children in the normal day of the week, and considering that this is, I believe, Thursday, I don't know if Ukrainian schools would have been in session during the time it was struck. With that, we're now going to be moving out of Kramatorsk, and we're now going to be moving into the town of Seversk, where we have seen that Ukrainian forces are evacuating the civilians from the Seversk area, just like they did from Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, just in case if things go south. Of course, credit for this video goes to Radio Free Europe, who put out this, and I have to say that they've been setting the bar in delivering non-mainstream news on the war in Ukraine that is truthful and verified. With that, here's the video.
Для того, чтобы эвакуировать людей из города Северска, волонтеры наперед наметили себе сразу несколько адресов для того, чтобы не ездить, не искать людей. Здесь Северск — это одна из крайних... Да, ебать. Стоп.
We hear a couple of artillery shells hitting the ground in the distance.
Давай, за ним, сейчас прилетит. Давай, назад.
We now see the damage in the town of Seversk. And apparently 3,000 people have decided to stay within the town.
Вопрос. Здесь есть кто-то на эвакуацию? Потому что мы заезжали несколько дней назад, и тут вроде хотели люди выехать.
Не знаю, наверное, все, кто... Здесь парень... Ой, спасибо, девочка, дай я тебе ручку поцелую.
I gotta say that this guy is kind of a character. I don't really know how to describe him because he's just kind of being weird to the camera crew and everyone that's there. He comes out and he's like, there's a war going on. There's a barrage literally just hundreds of yards away. And he's sitting here asking for flour and sugar. And then when they're like, well, there's a war going on, he's like, whatever, you know, it's pretty far away. And then a lady comes up and gives him some medicine. And he's like, let me kiss you on the hand. And then she's like, nah, no thanks. And then he does it anyways.
Не знаю, наверное, все, кто... Здесь парень... Ой, спасибо, девочка, дай я тебе ручку поцелую.
We now see the crew running off. I think they're more scared of the man now than the artillery barrage.
Назад, я не знаю. Давай назад.
Что там, нормально? Кто были там на огороде?
You now see them visiting another family. It appears that there is someone who's injured here.
Здесь как бы сквозная, вот так вот у него на выход сквозная.
They're now evacuating him and getting him out of the area.
Сейчас раненого мужчину садят в автомобиль эвакуационный и будут его отвозить как-то в более безопасное место. Но это не единственный раненый на этой улице. Вот там по дороге есть еще одна раненая женщина.
Скорее всего, осколок.
Ну, ее надо вывозить, потому что...
You now see them loading in more civilians into the van and getting out of there while we see fires burning on the grasses around the road. Wait a minute, hang on. Did y'all see that? That girl right there. She has a patch on that says Swiss. I'm guessing she's from Switzerland. Which is very weird because usually Swiss people don't get involved in much. But still, interesting video to see, and it's good to know that the Ukrainians are evacuating people out of the city of Seversk, considering that it is close to the front lines and it has become the target of Russian artillery over the past weeks after the Ukrainians retreated out of the city of Lysychansk. With that, that's the end of the video. Pretty interesting look at what's going on in the town of Seversk. And with that, we're now going to be moving out of Seversk and more closer to the front lines, where we've seen the Ukrainians using a javelin somewhere in the area. With that, here's the video. Let me make sure there's no music. There's music. You see him preparing to fire, and then he then fires the javelin, and it's now on its way. You now see a drone supposedly showing the hit of the javelin, and if that was, it looked like it may have hit a vehicle, although we couldn't really tell. It looked like it may have just hit a house, so we're not entirely sure, but it is cool to see that the javelins are still operational all around the country, and that ammunition is still being provided to them, which helps them to keep on churning out the fire and keep on defending Ukraine. With that, we're now going to be moving out of this bit of news, and we're now going to be moving further down the line, and surprisingly enough, of course, we haven't gotten a lot of frontline news. The frontline has largely become inactive, but we have seen a lot of behind-the-lines news. For example, we've seen an M109 firing today, which I believe this one was provided by the Norwegians. Note, and this is credit to the Norwegians because the Ukrainians haven't had this one for long, note how clean the Norwegians kept this M109 in the interior. The paint is spotless, the floor is clean, everything about this vehicle is spotless. And it's unlike a Russian tank or an SPG, which would be absolutely filthy. Here's the video of the M109 firing. There goes the gun. It fires. Then they put it in a black and white filter, and that's the end of the video. It's still really neat to see that a lot of Western countries have provided loads of SPGs and ammunition for the Ukrainians to try and fight the Russians back with, and apparently 22 of these M109A3GNs are in Ukraine and operational. Hopefully that number never declines, hopefully it'll increase, and it's good to see that the Ukrainians are putting the Norwegian M109s to good use. Moving further on down the line towards the village of Fedorivka, we've also seen a Buk system shooting down an Orlan 10 drone. Overkill? Not really. I mean, like, when you consider that an Orlan could report back Ukrainian locations and dozens of soldiers could potentially be killed, I would say that shooting down an Orlan 10 with a Buk surface-to-air missile may not be overkill in that regard. So, here's the video. Missile's now traveling. It's now going for the drone. Boom! Hit the Orlan, knocking it out. It's always impressive to see the Ukrainian air defenses at work. It's always something that is just cool. I mean, like, it really is neat to see, and it's cool to know that while it's not necessarily efficient to use a Buk to shoot down an Orlan, if that's the only thing you have in the area, then more power to them to make sure to shoot down Orlans wherever possible. With that, we're now going to be moving on to the next bit of news, which actually does come to the front lines near Berestove, where we've seen, from a Russian perspective, the Russians under fire. So without further ado, here's the video. You hear the firefight occurring around them. This is one of the few times that we've actually seen the Russians in a real firefight. Also, notice, this guy is actually wounded. And you can see that things aren't really going well for him in this video. Very interesting turn from the normal Russian videos we see. We now see, of course, this guy firing like an idiot. You know, look at that. He imagines he's Rambo or something. This is a movie to him. And, you know, it's interesting because the about 38,000 Russian soldiers have tried to recreate the movie Rambo, and so far none of them have ever actually been able to make it to the end credits. I would say more so that the filming experience has brought them, put them in the end credits a little bit quicker than they expected. And we can see here another guy imagining he's Rambo. Once again, another little Rambo move. Did you hear that?
I did not actually.
Okay, I'll key you in here because this was a good little sequence here. This guy, since they're all in low spirits, this guy, I guess he's the goofy goober of the group, he decides that he's going to start a little comedy monologue over there and wagging his finger, and they get slammed by something. Something explodes right on the other side of this wall, and then that same guy who's doing the monologue here, he starts screaming like a little baby. So let's watch that again.
Oh my God.
He was all brave and stuff until it actually hit near him, and then he screams like a kid. Now, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have that same reaction if something exploded near me, but if you're trying to sit there and look all cool and tough and stuff and wag your finger and go, Russia's so strong, Russia's so great, maybe not scream like that when something blows up near you. I'm gonna watch that again, actually, because that was funny to me. Oh my God.
Oh.
That's gold. We're gonna let the video continue. Now look at him. And now he's not all cool and cocky anymore. He's all shaken up. He's jerking the gun around and stuff. He doesn't know what to do. We're gonna let the video continue. And the fire is picking up. The Ukrainians are laying it down on these guys thick. Now see another explosion right near him. I can't get over that scream. That was one of the funniest things to end a monologue with. He looks like he's having fun. Now we can see that the Russians have decided, since this wall was just hit by something a minute ago, or hit very close by something, now is the time to pack in even more guys to sit on this wall, so that way if something does hit directly on it, it'll blow right through it and kill all of them. Once again, a normal Russian tactic, kind of like emphasizing the key role that stupidity plays in their doctrine. Now, I want to go back, okay? I know that this might be overdoing it a little, but I've got to go back and listen to this guy's monologue again and then his scream after the explosion. So here's the video again. Well, at least this part. Oh my gosh. Oh, man. Oh man, I don't even know what to describe that, guys. Usually we give people like this names that are memorable, but I don't know. I mean, one second, I gotta listen to that one more time. Sorry, everyone. Okay, we're moving on. Anyways, the Russians were under fire there, getting absolutely plastered, and we could see that none of them were really having a good time, and the one guy who was trying to have a good time ended up screaming like a little girl. Now, I want to say this again. I understand being scared in the middle of a firefight, and I probably would have done the exact same thing in that situation. But you would have, but if I was loud mouthing right before something like that happened, you bet I would have held my tongue as hard as I could to make sure I didn't scream like a little girl after trying to sit there and look all cool and macho like I wasn't scared. Because that guy literally went from one end of the most extreme side of the spectrum to the other. So with that, we're going to move on to the next video, which is actually out of the Luhansk region and down in Donetsk. But before we move out of the Donetsk region, of course, there's been no activity to report from here. It seems like Russian forces have stalled, and as far as we know, they may have run out of ammunition, and the ammo depots behind the lines are being hit so heavily and so frequently, they're not really having the opportunity to rebuild their ammunition stores. With that, we're now going to be moving down to the Donetsk region, where we have seen the resumption of some activity in the Marinka area. Specifically, the DPR has been bombarding Ukrainian forces here yesterday and today fairly heavily, and we have seen that on film. And so with that, here's the first video of a Ukrainian checkpoint being bombarded by the DPR. You see the artillery coming in, but we don't see any actual Ukrainian soldiers to say if they're hitting anything that has a soldier inside of it. We do see a Ukrainian truck, though, moving down the road past a roadblock, trying to get further down the street. We can now see it kind of coming to a stop and pulling over. And now it looks like they're trying to do a three-point turn. Or stop in the middle of the street. We now see Ukrainian soldiers walking out of the checkpoint down here further on the road and walking up to the truck. It seems like the truck was actually trying to back itself into a specific point in the tree line where it can get hidden. We now see what appears to be maybe a commandeered civilian vehicle or just a normal car moving down the road as well. And then we can see that the artillery shell landed right on that truck and, of course, unfortunately destroyed it. We now see the car doing a complete turn and getting out of there. We now see the Ukrainian soldier that was close to the explosion running away and getting out of the area. And we can see that the DPR artillery continues to come down on the truck, making sure to knock it out. It also appears that we may have the beginning of a fire inside of the trees where that truck may have been. Now the artillery is coming down directly onto the checkpoint, and we can see that that first shot did a decent amount of damage to it. This is the unfortunate fact of war, is that every once in a while, the people we are rooting for will, of course, get the short end of the stick. We are seeing one Ukrainian soldier running out of the area, hopefully to safety. But with this footage in mind, this is not showing that the front lines in Marinka are collapsing. As far as we know, they are holding incredibly well, although they are being battered heavily by the DPR artillery, which seems to have gotten a little bit of increase in its accuracy. We've usually not seen levels of accuracy like this from Russian or pro-Russian artillery before, but it seems in this specific area there's apparently some pretty accurate artillery units being fielded by either the DPR or the Russian army. Now it appears that the checkpoint is also on fire along with an adjacent house. An unfortunate scene that was also reflected in another film, this time taken by a Ukrainian soldier from the 54th Brigade, showing them being hit by Russian artillery and running to a dugout. Here's that video as well to accompany the last one. And you see that one of the rounds landed incredibly close.
А с ним связь есть вообще?
You now see that one of them landed almost right on top of the trench.
Марс! Да. Все нормально? Да. Плюс.
Now see him picking up the camera. Now another round is almost fallen completely on top of him. And now it looks like...
Она может второй уже подряд, блядь.
Now another round's landed on top of him. And that's the end of the video, but you can tell that the DPR artillery is starting to hit them heavily, and on top of that, seems like it's increased a little bit in accuracy. However, this artillery barrage did not go without a response by the Ukrainian 54th Brigade, which fired back at the Russians. Actually, it was the 56th Brigade, but the 54th and the 56th are in the same area on the front. Here's the video. And we have to mute that. But you can see them slamming dead onto a Russian main battle tank. You now see them looking into the tree line at what may be another Russian vehicle right there. And then showing us an artillery hit on the tree line. Of course, we have to wait for black smoke to confirm that vehicle has been knocked out, and that is certainly a knocked out vehicle. The next bit of film, we can see the 56th Brigade raining down artillery on an even other area of the front line, once again hitting another Russian main battle tank, knocking it out. We can now see a nice little toasty fire. Of course, being bombarded all day leads you to want to sit around a campfire, and we can now see the Ukrainians making sure that they'll have one to sit around at the end of the day. With that, that's the end of the video. And it's great to see that the Ukrainians are still knocking out Russian forces in the area. And at the end of this little video, I believe we're starting to see the resumption of an artillery battle in between the DPR and the Ukrainians. We saw this about a month ago. It lasted for around a week, where the Ukrainians and the Russians would bombard each other constantly from both sides of the front, but no offensive or defensive action followed up with the artillery. And so by and large, I believe that this is the same thing we're starting to see here. It seems like it was started by the DPR, which started to bombard Ukrainian positions yesterday, and now it appears that the Ukrainians are responding in kind. It doesn't really matter who started it. It's just going to be a little small artillery battle, most likely, that won't result in any frontline changes. This area of the front line is like a fortress for both sides, and so an offensive against one or the other is largely suicide for both of them. With that, we have now covered all of the Donbass news in general, and so we're going to go up to Kyiv to cover the speech from President Zelenskyy. Of course, tonight I'll have to read off the subtitles to y'all here. So let me pop those up, and we will get this thing running.
And so, actually, Enforcer, if you want to, you can click and hold the subtitles, and I think you can drag them to the top.
Oh, we actually can. So I won't have to read it to y'all. Y'all actually be able to hear Zelenskyy tonight, and here's the speech from President Zelenskyy.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці. Провів сьогодні чергове засідання Ставки Верховного Головнокомандувача. Цей формат нашої роботи об'єднує ключових керівників сфери оборони і сектору безпеки. Заслухали доповіді керівника Головного управління розвідки Кирила Буданова, також керівника Служби зовнішньої розвідки Олександра Литвиненка, головнокомандувача Збройних сил України Валерія Залужного, міністра оборони Олексія Резнікова, а також міністра внутрішніх справ Дениса Монастирського. Безпосередньо з передової підключався до засідання Ставки генерал-полковник Олександр Сирський, командувач сухопутних військ. Обговорили поточну ситуацію на передовій і довкола України. Визначили завдання на деяких тактичних напрямках для посилення наших позицій. І дуже предметно опрацювали питання про постачання новітніх озброєнь у війська. Потрібно ще збільшувати інтенсивність ударів по ворогу. Учасники засідання Ставки погодились, що маємо істотний потенціал для просування наших сил на фронті і для завдання окупантам нових відчутних втрат. Сьогодні ж відбулася чергова розмова керівника мого офісу Андрія Єрмака і генерала Залужного з радником президента США з питань національної безпеки Джейком Саліваном і головою об'єднаного комітету начальників штабів генералом Марком Міллі. У такому форматі 2 на 2 постійно обговорюються всі ключові питання взаємодії в оборонній сфері між Україною і Сполученими Штатами. Провів переговори з президентом Коста-Ріки вперше в історії відносин між нашими державами, подякував йому за підтримку України, це відчувається, за протидію російській пропаганді і запровадження санкцій. І продовжуємо робити все можливе, щоб в кожній частині світу знали правду про дії Росії проти України. Наша дипломатія постійно створює нові зв'язки з країнами, які довгий час не були в центрі уваги української зовнішньої політики. А завтра очікуємо ще й новин для нашої держави з Туреччини щодо розблокування наших портів. На тлі такої регулярної військово-політичної і дипломатичної активності було сьогодні трошки дивно почути, що з'явився старий новий фейк російської пропаганди про мене, що нібито я в реанімації, що нібито обов'язки глави держави виконує Руслан Стефанчук. Ну що можна сказати? Раніше майже щотижнево російські пропагандисти і посадовці вкидали фейки про те, що я нібито кудись поїхав з України або нібито не виконую свої обов'язки. Потім це все припинилось. І ось знову викидують такі примітивні речі. Схоже, навіть снаряди брехні в окупантів вичерпуються. Не здатні придумати нічого нового. Неодмінно вичерпується і наявний потенціал для усіх форм російської агресії, в тому числі для наступальних дій на фронті і терору проти наших міст. Ми зробимо все, щоб прискорити це, і саме на цьому наголошуємо в усіх контактах з нашими партнерами. Сьогодні російська армія знову обстріляла з реактивної артилерії Салтівський район Харкова суто цивільні об'єкти, житловий будинок, торговельні павільйони, громадський транспорт. Станом на цей час відомо про 3 загиблих, більше 20 людей в списку поранених. Теж з ураганів окупанти обстріляли і Слов'янську громаду на Донбасі, вдарили іскандерами по Краматорську. І кожен з таких російських обстрілів – це аргумент, щоб Україна отримала більше хаймарсів та іншого сучасного ефективного озброєння. Кожен з таких обстрілів тільки посилює наше прагнення до перемоги над окупантами. Неодмінно це буде. Декілька місяців тому наша експертна група під головуванням Єрмака і Макфола запропонувала визнати дії Росії проти України геноцидом. І ось перший реальний результат візиту першої леді України в Сполучені Штати. Сенатори Ріш, Кардін, Вікер, Блюменталь, Портман, Шахін та Грем представили проект резолюції про визнання дій Росії в Україні геноцидом. У резолюції зазначено, що дії Росії в Україні, які включають примусову депортацію до Росії та цілеспрямоване вбивство українського цивільного населення під час масових звірств, є геноцидом проти народу України. Сенатори представили резолюцію невдовзі після того, як Олена виступила зі зверненням безпосередньо до Конгресу США. Відповідно до проєкту документа, Сенат США засуджує Росію за вчинення актів геноциду проти народу України, закликає Сполучені Штати разом із союзниками по НАТО та ЄС підтримати уряд України, щоб запобігти подальшим актам російського геноциду проти українського народу, підтримує трибунали та міжнародні кримінальні розслідування для притягнення російських політичних лідерів і військового персоналу до відповідальності за агресивну війну, за військові злочини проти людяності та геноцид. Всіма своїми терористичними атаками проти українців і нашої держави Росія тільки закопує сама себе. Підписав ввечері черговий указ про нагородження наших воїнів. 186 учасників бойових дій відзначені державними нагородами. Вічна вдячність усім, хто воює за Україну. Слава Україні!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Zelenskyy, marking the end of the Day 148 news. I thank you all so much for watching the news segment. We're about to move into the question segment, but if you were here for the news alone, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps out our streams a great deal, and it helps us to reach more people and let them hear the news as well. So thank you all once again, and without further ado, the rest of y'all who have thrown in super chats with questions attached, or super chats in general, or just questions in the live chat, we're about to get around to answering as many as we can. And so, without further ado, what do we got, Matthew?
All right, and moving into our final question segment of the night, up first we have a $25 super chat from Uncle Tababite, who says, this is for coffee, iced coffee, tea, or maybe those boba tea.
Well, thank you very much for the support, Tababite, and you pretty much covered the every single kind of coffee fun that we could ever have. And so, with that, I thank you so much for the support, Tababite. It helps us out a lot, and it helps us to keep on drinking the coffees, making sure to pay the tuitions, and of course, all the other stuff. And so thank you once again for the massive amount of support. It helps us out a great deal. And with that, we are on to the next question, and we're going to make sure to drink a coffee in your honor. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $20 super chat from MMC, who says, Enforcer, didn't the Marshall Plan include the newly formed West Germany? World leaders did not want to repeat World War I's aftermath, which led to World War II.
Yes, that's true. The Marshall Plan actually heavily emphasized economic support to the Germans. The reason why, there's actually a really interesting history behind West Germany that could be covered in a video, but West Germany was a little bit of a conundrum. No one really knew what to do with it, and y'all may remember the occupation zones of Germany after World War II. And I'll show you what those looked like, just to jog everyone's memory. So, let's look at this. The British got everything in the north. So this included Hamburg, I believe. Let me think of all the other towns. We'll just pull it up in Google Maps. Germany. The British, and this was for a short while, it was only for a few years, they occupied a decent amount of those larger cities like Dortmund, Essen, Dusseldorf, and Cologne. The French, if I go over here, the French got to occupy the Ruhr, in a way, and they also got to occupy, I forgot what the name of this area is down here in the southwest of Germany, but y'all get the picture. The United States pretty much occupied the entirety of Bavaria, and also some more of the interior of Germany. It appears to have included Würzburg and Frankfurt, I believe. Yes, I believe it would have included Frankfurt. And then the Soviets got everything that made up East Germany. And then Berlin, as you can see right there, was then even further updivided, with the British, the Americans, and the French controlling their own zones of Berlin, and then the Soviets controlling the other half of Berlin. Then the rest of Germany was partitioned off to Poland. Russia, the Soviet Union got part of East Prussia, which then turned into Kaliningrad. And so that's how it was kind of divided. After a while, because this little military occupation thing was actually going to last for a while at the outset, and the West didn't really know what to do with Germany. There was actually a couple of plans, and one of them was to completely neuter the Germans of their economic ability and make the Rhineland a completely separate, independent country than the rest of Germany, ensuring that Germany would have neither the manpower nor the economic production in the same country to be able to do the things they did before. But the problem was that the East German area that was controlled by the Soviets and then became a puppet country would have fared a lot better than West Germany if it was to be partitioned the way I just said. And so the West decided to unite all of West Germany into one large country, which then became West Germany, and then they started to funnel in the money through the Marshall Plan to make sure that it would succeed far better than East Germany ever could, which then of course led to a large mass migration of East Germans to the West German area of the country, which then led to the construction of the Berlin Wall and all that stuff, and you all know that little bit of history. But that is largely true. We did send a massive amount of money to Germany during the Marshall Plan, and also another thing is that a lot of y'all here in the United States may think of Germany as the Oktoberfest people. And I'll show y'all this too, because some of y'all may have never seen this. A lot of people, when they think of Germany, think of lederhosen, and they also think of girls dressed like this. And the reason why is because Oktoberfest is largely a solely Bavarian thing. And during the U.S. occupation of Germany, and also where a lot of American soldiers ended up in World War II, they wound up in Bavaria. And so a lot of American soldiers came home with an idea that all Germans were like that, when it was almost exclusively a Bavarian thing. So with that, also to kind of add to that a little bit more, Bavaria is kind of like the southern U.S. Well, the southern U.S. is to the United States what Bavaria is to Germany. It's kind of a separate enough that it has its own culture in a way. And also, I think the rest of Germany looks as Bavaria as kind of like the country hicks of their own country, which is kind of funny, and I kind of sympathize with that because that's how we're looked at here in the South. But with that, I hope that kind of does address that question and also add a little bit of history to it. And with that, we are now going to move on to the next one.
And then next up, we have a $20 super chat from DC Williams, who says, this is for the tartan plaid explanation.
And thank you very much for the support, and I'm glad you did enjoy that tartan plaid explanation. It's gotten wrong so many times, and people go, look at that plaid, and, you know, they'll be talking about a tartan, and it just irks me so much. I hate that. And, you know, it's always funny to me that people always want to be sticklers on certain things, you know, and make sure that people know that it's a certain way, and people do this and people do that. But then they'll get stuff wrong like that on like Scottish culture, which is as interesting as any other. It kind of irks me a little, and I'm glad that a lot of people did enjoy that little explanation. So thank you so much for the support, and thank you for enjoying that as well. I know that we are a Ukraine war stream, but every once in a while we do get a little off track, and we always talk about something that's a little off the beaten path. But with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again for the support.
And next up, I want to give a shout out to Dubs 20,000 for putting in a $12 donation to the channel and does not leave a comment. But thank you very much for the support, and we appreciate you very much. And moving on, we have a $12 super chat from David Hollinghurst, who says, the West is the best.
Well, thank you very much for the support, David. And I would have to say that West versus East, the West definitely is the best. It provides a higher quality of life. Of course, it's economically more stable and far more successful. And so in that regard, I would definitely have to say that the West is the best. And if the Russians would actually just try and implement Western ideas 100%, they would be able to pull ahead and actually become a competitive country, but they never will. So with that, I hope that does address the comment, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Edward Curl, who says, a couple of months ago, it was reported and confirmed that the UK and another NATO country sent M270s to Ukraine. It fires the same munitions as the HIMARS.
Well, they didn't confirm that they had been sent. They confirmed that they were going to send them. And that's something that we still haven't seen to this day. We haven't seen the M270s operating in Ukraine on film yet. We have seen training videos of them, but we've never seen a physical video of them there. And of course, this channel, whenever talking about frontline news like that, we always want to rely around picture and video evidence when trying to confirm that stuff. And so while there was supposed to be around 8 to 12 M270s in total sent to Ukraine, we've never seen them on film. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And that is true. They did say they were going to send them, but we're not sure if they're actually there yet because we haven't got any picture or video evidence. But thank you once again for the support. I hope that does address that comment. And now it has a lot of truth to it. It's just that they hadn't been sent at that point yet. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Dr. Doom 1313, who says, Enforcer and Matt, you guys are perfectly genuine and wonderfully unscripted, informative, and endearing. Thank you for keeping the terrible war in the conscience of the free.
And thank you so much for the support. Of course, we try our best to cover this war and make sure that it gets a decent amount of attention and support. That's one thing I don't think a lot of people understand, is that the reason why the titles for the streams are always in all caps is that we're trying to draw as much attention as possible to the war and keep people thinking about it. Because if, of course, we made it lame, no one's going to care about it. You know, sadly enough, people only look at things that they think are sensational and stuff like that. So we always make the titles, you know, bold enough that people will come and make sure to keep their eyes on Ukraine. And also, we always make sure to hype up our fundraisers as much as possible, which this Sunday's on the 24th, I mean, it's going to be the biggest one we've ever had in terms of guest stars. We currently have 2 guest stars lined up, and we're looking at getting another 3rd or a 4th on as well. So I'm going to let y'all know how that goes. Of course, y'all just see the night of, but we're going to try and make it the largest fundraiser we've ever had in terms of the amount raised, the amount of guest stars on, and everything. Hopefully it can work. I would love to see that actually happen. But with that, I hope that does address your comment. And I thank you so much for being so kind with your words about Matthew and me. We try our best, and of course, we don't like to get too scripted, and we also don't want to sound too deadpan, because it is a war, and that's of course an unfortunate thing, but at the same time, you just have to live with it, you know, because I don't understand the people who sit there and go, you don't understand, man, people are dying all over the place, because I do understand that, first, and then second, me putting a somber tone on this war and making it an absolute dread to listen to war news is not going to change that fact. So, of course, we always try and make sure that it's actually watchable for people and people can stay interested in this war. And so with that, thank you once again. We do enjoy the support, and it helps our channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And yes, thank you very much, Dr. Doom, for the very kind words. And it does mean very much to us. Excuse me there, I got distracted by something in the live chat. But thank you very much for the support and the kind words. And up next, we have a $10 super chat from Rick Brick 75, who says, have you heard of the new HIMARS song? It's the same artist as the Bayraktar song. Should add it to your stream's intro, and I have the link to it on Twitter if you need it. Gerashenko posted it on Twitter with subtitles.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and the answer to that question is yes, we have heard it, and we've actually played it on stream before. We actually had a little bit of a mixed feedback. It seemed like some people liked it, some people didn't, and the Bayraktar song, I think, is the golden version of a song for the Ukraine war. I think the HIMARS song was good, but I still think the Bayraktar song is very good. We'll make sure to include that one eventually in the future, but I would actually like to see about running a poll on that and seeing if people would like to have that in our waiting room sooner or later. And so with that, I thank you so much for the support, and I hope that does answer your question. And of course, we appreciate everyone who helps this channel keep on running. If it wasn't for supporters like y'all who, you know, of course, help us to pay our bills and keep the lights on, these streams wouldn't be able to run. And of course, we owe a lot to y'all because that's the only way we can keep running. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says the U.S. Air Force has been trying to get rid of them since before Desert Storm. Even after the Thunderbolt II proved itself, the Army fought against getting rid of them, and Congress still wants to keep them too.
Yes, I do know about that. The history of the A-10 has largely been it got introduced into service, and then everyone was trying to get it out of service as fast as possible. There is a time, though, where that kind of sentiment does eventually catch up, and it becomes true. You know, because, you know, there's people who hated the SBD-3 Dauntless in World War II and wanted that thing gone. And while it did incredibly good at the beginning of the war, as the war began to go on, it became a sitting duck, and it would get shot down a decent bit. So I do see the trend here. You know, there's a historical precedent for people wanting these things just to be done with, and they never do, and then they're incredibly effective. But at the same time, the A-10 was shot down a decent bit during the invasion of Iraq as well as the Gulf War. It made up a decent amount of coalition air casualties during both of the wars. And so in that regard, I can kind of see it being a little dated in the modern world, especially with the speed it has, and also kind of like its focus on its simplicity. Also, another thing is that people say, it's armored, it has titanium. It has a titanium bathtub around the pilot. That does not protect anything else on the aircraft. And may I remind y'all that the Ka-52 was also alluded to be a flying tank that had loads of armor. It was just well protected. No one could ever shoot this thing down. And we've seen dozens of these things get shot down over Ukraine. And this thing was alluded to be an armored tank just like the A-10, but in helicopter form. And so it does show the fact that you can have a lot of hype around something, because the Ka-52 was thought to be invincible until this war came to be, and then we saw that it could easily be shot down. And while the A-10s are incredibly effective and good aircraft, I still think that they might end up being shot down at least a couple of times. But still, I'm a huge fan of the A-10. I think it looks really cool, and any support is better than no support, and the A-10, in my opinion, is still far more capable than the Su-25. And so with that, I hope that does address that comment, and I thank you once again for the support and adding a little bit of historical context to the A-10 and what it's gone through during its life. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $10 super chat from Junebug with the 72 at the end, who says, sorry, I slept through until now, but I will catch up. I always love the streams, and I love your care for Ukraine and its people at more. Hope you and Matt are well, and Slava Ukraini.
Well, I thank you so much for the support, Junebug, and shame you slept through it. Of course, I'm just kidding. You know, you can always watch the replays of it. But I thank you so much for always being here and supporting this channel and enjoying what we do in our care for the Ukrainians. We've been trying to, we haven't been trying. We have been keeping up war coverage weekly every single day since the beginning of the war, except for Mondays. And we're going to keep doing that for as long as possible. And of course, we did make a commitment that we'll try and do this until the war ends. But if this war goes on for 2 years or 3 years, I don't really know at that point, because at that point it's like, how in the world will I actually keep that promise with a whole bunch of stuff going on in the background? And something that I've been thinking about is I've been doing this for nearly 5 months at this point, and something that started to cross, well, actually in 2 days' time, it will have been 5 months, and I'm starting to wonder, when do I take a break? You know, like when do I take like 3 days off or something? Because it's been fun to do this, but at the same time, you know, I haven't been able to take a vacation or do anything really, rather than just kind of like rest on a Monday and then get back at this. So that's something that everyone's always throwing around in the background, and that's something that I've been thinking about as well. But of course, we're going to try and keep this up until the end of the war, every single day of the week, except for Mondays. And I thank you once again for being a longtime Lee Spring Army member, Junebug, and helping out to keep running these streams. It's of course greatly appreciated, and without y'all, it wouldn't be possible. So thank you once again. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Tito McLovin, who says, yes, the A-10 can survive a ZSU-27 hit, but folks, this is not Iraq or Afghanistan. The orcs have manpads, SAMs, and tactical aircraft. Don't even dream of sending AC-130s or AH-64 Apaches either.
And that's a great point. That's kind of that's kind of what I'm thinking, is that a lot of people think that the A-10 is a beast, but if it got shot by Estrella, it's going to go down like anything. And on top of that, it's so slow that there's really not a lot it can do rather than just pop loads of chaff and flares and hope that that throws the missile off, which might not always do the trick. So in that instance, yes, I can agree with that a lot, and certainly the AC-130. Now, I just got to say, there's a lot of... I would say that there's a lot of military hype and propaganda that sometimes surrounds our vehicles here in the United States, and I would have to say that one of those vehicles that's gotten an ungodly and undeserved amount of propaganda is the AC-130. Cool? Yes. No question. Very cool vehicle. Practical in concept? No, it's not. I mean, like, these things, even in Afghanistan, they only use these things at night, because if they didn't, these things could be messed up really bad. I mean, like, if the Afghans just managed to have a 37mm autocannon laying around, you could shoot this thing down if you tried hard enough. And so I just... like, this thing, certainly no, absolutely not. You couldn't send this thing to Ukraine. It would get shot down. It would be pointless. It'd be a waste of money, supplies, and manpower for the Ukrainians to undergo. And I just can't see this thing being used. I mean, you could see this thing being used against cartels, some thugs, maybe the Taliban. Yeah, but in a real war, no. It just doesn't fit. It just doesn't work. It's not practical. And so I can definitely agree with that. AH-64 Apache, though, there are instances where this thing can be used, because some of the more modern versions have gotten some upgrades on them that have made them able to be used at treetop level and still be effective. And we'll try and scroll down. You can see the original YAH-64 prototype. And thank God they really upgraded that thing to look like this. But with that, we're going to move down. You can see that the original AH-64s had nothing on top of the tail rotor, but as time goes by, you'll see that they started to change that out a little bit. More specifically, when we get into the modern day, this is an Israeli helicopter, but you'll see this large disc on top of the helicopter's rotor, and as far as I can tell, I think that's supposed to be some kind of a... I want to make sure on this. I may be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but this is some kind of a camera system or something similar to it that allows the Apache to operate at treetop level. I may be wrong with that, so take that one with a grain of salt for sure. I'm sure that someone's about to take offense to that comment and make it sound like it was an attack against them, but we'll see. but I have seen a new AH-64 Apache that definitely had something like that on it. But I want to make sure, because I remember that the Army doctrine in the 80s had already determined that helicopters could not be used above treetop level. They would be shot down. And so they had to start making some necessary changes to how this helicopter could be used. But then again, take it with a grain of salt. I don't know everything about the AH-64, specifically this thing on top of it. And so a lot of people are saying it's a longbow radar. So we'll look into that a little bit more, maybe off stream. But with that, I hope that does address the comment. And I would definitely say not to send over an AC-130. And considering that there's a lot of man-pads in Ukraine, the questionability whether an A-10 could be used is also up for grabs. And so with that, we're on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support and bringing that up.
And next up, we have a $10 super chat from William Allen, who says, those were OA-10s for forward air control. Not only used binoculars, but China markers too for writing info on the canopy. They were the eyes for all the bomb droppers, from a United States Air Force historian.
Well, I thank you very much for the support, and I thank you for clarifying that. I actually didn't know that they used China markers as well. But of course, it's interesting to actually know that apparently everyone used binoculars during the Gulf War. And also, I think I heard some rumors that they had actually used sometimes an astrolabe to navigate. I don't know about that one. I think that may be incorrect, but let me know in the comments if it is. So with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you so much for the support, and thank you for clarifying that statement a little bit more. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 super chat from Telmed, who says, I couldn't get my message on super chat, but I still think that Baghdad Bob is much better than Lavrov.
Well, thank you very much for the support, and I would have to agree that that Baghdad Bob is better than Lavrov. Also, something funny that I remember the first hate comment I ever got, which was on the day 4 when this channel blew up. Someone said I sounded like Baghdad Bob, and I found that really funny. But with that, thank you for reminding me of something I saw on day 4, and also thank you very much for the joke as well, because I would have to agree that Baghdad Bob is definitely a better propagandist than Lavrov ever could imagine to be. And so with that, thank you once again for the support, and we are on to the next one.
And next up, let me give some shout outs to people who left donations without comments. Up first, we have an $8 donation from Chaz Wazzer. Then we have a $5 donation from Anthony. We also have a $5 donation from Callie J, a $5 donation from Ephraim Dimmer from Israel, I believe, and then a $3 donation from Raquel 8, a $1 donation from Zach Jeffers, our Discord mod, and a $2 donation from T77. So thank you to all of you for your support. You don't leave comments, but you apparently love the channel, or you wouldn't be donating. So thank you very much for that. And with that being said, we are moving on to our next super chat, which is from Dan Stauffer, who says, I am a fireman in Spartanburg, South Carolina. I have my EMT and multiple rescue classes and certifications. How can I use and go to Ukraine and fight?
I'm not sure if you could use those to fight, but they definitely need a lot of help in the support groups like first aid and medical assistance and things like that, and they certainly could use you over there for something more like that. Combat troops, I think they have enough of those that they don't really have to worry about that, but the behind the lines support units always need massive amounts of support, and I would highly suggest that if you were to go to Ukraine, to volunteer your services as a firefighter or an EMS instead of a frontline soldier. Your talents could be better used behind the lines. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And I thank you once again for the support. It does help our channel to keep on running. And I hope that does give you a little bit of guidance in a better direction. But once again, take my advisement with a grain of salt. I don't know everything. You may be able to become a combat soldier with that kind of repertoire, but then again, you could also be used incredibly well as a, I guess you could say, a medic or a firefighter itself. And so with that, we are on to the next one, and I thank you once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $100 super chat from Running Bear, who says, keep it rolling, guys. And first off, thank you very much for the support, Running Bear. That is very generous of you. And I'm not sure about the Enforcer, but I have to say, hopefully the Leaf Spring Army doesn't take any breaks and we keep the coverage consistent because everybody's relying on our news and everybody loves to hear it. And thank you all so much for your support.
And also, I would like to thank you so much for the support, Running Bear. I guess you're a running bear. Let's pull that up on Google real quick. Running Bear. Running Bear. It's a song by Johnny Preston. But we can also see running bears here. It's just a little bit of a joke. But I thank you so much for the support, Running Bear. I think that's the first time you supported our channel, is it?
I think that might be the second time.
Well, regardless of it's the first, the second, the 50th, the 60th, I thank you so much for the support, Running Bear. And we are going to try and keep this thing running the best we can. The reason why I was bringing it up is not me trying to say I'm going to flake out or anything. It's just that everyone's always saying, maybe you should like take a couple of days off. But then again, I don't really like the idea of that. Kind of been keeping this thing rolling at a steady pace every single day of the week at a standard time. Because this is one of my main reasons. I've noticed that people don't really read a lot of the YouTube community posts or the Discord announcements that I put out, and so like with the government cheese video, I think that was my wake up call. That even if I say it a million times, sometimes people just, I guess, they don't listen or read it or anything. Because the government cheese video came out, and I got like 100 comments on that video asking, what is this? Like where is this? And I was like, I posted this twice on the community page of the YouTube channel. I posted this like 3 times in the Discord, and I said it every single day for a week before that video was uploaded on stream. And so I wouldn't do that for that reason, because I feel like if I did, a whole bunch of people would be like, what happened? And then they would just leave. So that's one reason why we're probably not going to do that. But I thank you so much once again for the support, Running Bear, and we're going to keep this thing running the best we can. And so thank you once again, and I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And Enforcer, before you click off that page, do you see that picture at the bottom right there? It's the cartoon bear.
Yes.
Click on that. Oh my god. Okay, now that is a running bear right there. Now that is the real deal.
This thing looks like it's tweaking. Look at the eyeballs.
It really does. Running Bear, do you want that to be your icon or image, or do you want the other one?
This is one of those Russian bears that is huffing the jet fuel out in Siberia. That's what those bears look like.
Yes, that's hilarious. I just had to point that out real quick because I saw it and I couldn't let it go. So
wait, we got
that was my moment of stupidity. Oh, we have more.
Yeah, we...
Look at that thing.
This thing looks like a mix of Elmer Fudd and a bear. Hopefully I don't get copyrighted for this, but Elmer Fudd. Here's Elmer Fudd. This bear looks deformed.
Goodness. I don't know who created that, but that was some real creative drawings there.
I hate to be mean, but whoever made this bear right here needs to retire from the drawing and illustration sector, because that looks like a homunculus more than a bear. Oh my god. And it gets worse. It gets even... Well, this one's actually pretty decent. That looks like a little teddy bear, but this one... That's not a bear. That's like Rudolph the Red-Nosed Ranger mixed with Bart Simpson, and then maybe like those things on Star Wars. What are they called? The little fuzzy things. Fuzzy things from Star Wars. These things! This looks more like that. But anyways, with that, thank you very much once again for the support, Running Bear. And of course, we're going to keep this thing running the best we can. And so with that, we are going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again, Running Bear, for the massive amount of support.
All right. And next up, we have a $10 donation from William Allen, who says, all the way back to Vietnam War, the AC-130s were designed for night action. It took the place of the AC-47 and played a vital role in Panama 2. And thousands of hours in special ops, of which are classified.
And thank you very much once again for the support. And yes, that is true. The AC-130 was made to replace the Spooky, which was based off of a DC-3, or I guess you could call it a C-47 if you'd like. Pretty much the same plane, just minor variations. I think they actually were the same. But anyways, that is true. Still, it's not, in my opinion, it's just not usable enough to justify it, and especially not sending it over to Ukraine in a conventional war. Because if you look at all of these situations it's ever been used in, and the Vietnam War, the United States largely had aerial supremacy, and like the intervention in Panama, air supremacy. anywhere we've used it, it's had air supremacy on its side, and even at that, it still has to be used at night. And so imagine trying to send that thing to Ukraine, where the Russians actually have a pretty decent surface-to-air missile battery, and then putting it up against that. I just don't think it would survive, and I don't think it would be effective. And so with that, I thank you once again for the support, and also sharing a little bit of history about the AC-130. And with that, we are on to the next question, and thank you once again for the generous support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have an $8 super chat from John G, who says, paycheck arrived. Is there any news that suggests Ukraine is getting the SAMs, basically Norwegian HIMARS, and Slava Ukraine?
And thank you very much for the support. And of course, its paychecks arrived pretty nice. And thank you once again for helping this channel keep running. And to answer that question, I haven't heard anything about a Norwegian version of a HIMARS. I believe you may be talking about the M270s, and we haven't seen those in Ukraine yet. And can you reread that question real quick, man, to make sure I can answer all parts of it?
Yes. The question was, let's see here. Is there any news that suggests Ukraine is getting the SAMs, basically the Norwegian HIMARS, and Slava Ukraine?
We haven't gotten any news of them getting SAMs. That's still on the table. They're asking for them, but we haven't actually gotten any hardcore evidence or proof that more or any are being sent over. We do know that there's 2 NASAMs in Ukraine somewhere, but by and large, we haven't heard about any additional SAMs making it into the country. And so with that, I hope that does answer all parts of the question. And of course, I thank you so much for the support. It helps this channel to keep on running. And once again, thank you to the support of our viewers for keeping PBS running. And with that, we're on to the next question, and thank you once again.
All right, and next up, we have a $10 super chat from Gary Robbins, who does not leave a comment. But Gary, you support us all the time, and we appreciate it very much, and thank you for watching for such a long time. And moving on, we have a $10 super chat from Tim Q, who says, Leaf Springs, done.
Leaf Springs, done. So I thank you very much for the support, Tim Q. I hope you enjoyed that. And with that, we are moving on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support, Don.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from DL Hemingway, who says, I just want to help the cast as much as I can at this time.
And thank you for the support. And of course, it helps us out a whole load. It helps us to keep running these streams. And we're highly appreciative of it. And of course, thank you once again. Also, another thing that I've been thinking about doing is we have always joked about the Russians. This is a little bit of an aside, but it kind of crossed my mind, so I thought I'd run it by y'all. We've been thinking, well, I've been thinking, because we always joke about the Russians being Rambo, and y'all all know how Sylvester Stallone talks, and I actually do impersonations of him a little bit, you know, kind of just joking around. But if y'all ever wanted me to do that, we could, of course, give it a go, and we could see. I don't know if y'all are into that or not. I was going to pass that one by y'all first, but if we ever see a Russian doing a Rambo again, we're just going to sit there and talk like Rambo. And so that, thank you once again for the support. I hope that addressed your comment, and also kind of added in a little bit of an extra aside. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Ukraine F. Putin, who says, Enforcer, according to Vadim Skibitsky of the Military Intelligence of Ukraine, Russia has used 60% of its missiles. What do you think about that fact?
I think it may be true. We don't actually know the specific number of missiles specifically on this channel that the Russians went into the war with, and so we don't have any number to base that off of to confirm it. But considering how many missiles they have fired, I would assume that they have probably fired a large amount of them. It may be up to around 60% of their missiles used. And so with that, I hope that does kind of answer the question in a way. We don't have any hardcore numbers to go off of to confirm that, but I feel like it's at least believable. And so I hope that does answer the question that way. And with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Judo 2001, who says, Y'all are getting in my head. I was dreaming about playing cars with her and decided to bring in a toy tank. When I did, turret pop off.
Well, thank you very much for the support. It's very interesting to hear we're getting into people's dreams like Freddy Krueger or something. But of course, we're highly appreciative of the support, and we do enjoy that you do like our streams enough that you even have them in your dreams, at least in a way, with the turret toss. But with that, I hope it was a good turret toss, a solid 10 out of 10, and we appreciate you so much for the support, and I hope that you're, like, not having a problem with that, and you're, like, scraping the wallpaper off of the walls, yelling, "Get out of my head! Get out of my head, man!" Because I wouldn't like knowing that we're doing that to you. But with that, thank you once again for the support, and we're going to move on to the next question. I actually saw a lot of people wanting the Sylvester Stallone impression. We're not going to do that now, but we'll do that next time we see a Russian going Rambo. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $5 super chat from Mr. Lunchtime, who donates some of his lunch money and says Russia could resort to nuclear arms to counter off Ukraine. The window of opportunity to help Ukraine is narrowing. Institute for the Study of War.
Well, thank you very much for the support. But as far as the Institute of War, if that's where that came from, saying, I would have to disagree with that, because the idea of the Russians using nuclear weapons and escalating this into a nuclear holocaust worldwide, pretty much as the end result, seems to be unlikely, because of course that means that the Russians wouldn't even win anything from it; they would just lose. So with that, I hope that does address that in a way. I know that there's a lot of institutions out there that say this and that, and I've actually seen some institutes now agreeing with me, like I believe it's the Ministry of Defense, or MI6, said today that the Russians are most likely going to be collapsing within a few months, and the Ukrainians are going to regain most of their land. But I usually just never go with any of these groups, because they just say whatever, like they did at the beginning of the war, and it turned out to be wrong. And so I usually just make my own assumptions. And I don't think the Russians would use nuclear weapons, because that's just a lose-lose situation for them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And thank you once again for the support. And I hope that kind of addresses my comment on what the Institute of War has to say. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $5 super chat from Don Lupnitz, who says, Enforcer, I'm a newer listener. On Tuesday's video of the jets being shot down, I noticed written on the street, it said stop in English and not Cyrillic.
Yes, the Russians have a huge obsession with English. While they hate the Americans and the British, who both speak English, they seem to teach it a lot in school, and also they think that everyone in the world just knows English as a universal language. Kind of weird to me. It's also weird to see that on film. I didn't comment on it, because I felt like that was just something not to focus on, but then everyone commented on it. So yes, that is true, and I don't really know why they did that, rather than it being a common language. And so with that, thank you once again for the support and bringing that up. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, Michael Cabrera puts in a $5 donation and says, Enforcer, what happened to Mike Tyson?
What do you mean, what happened to Mike Tyson? You talking about the best heavyweight champion in the world, the best of the fighter of the fighters? What happened to Mike Tyson was that a lot of people didn't like Mike Tyson in our stream. They were all saying that he sounded like Special Ed, and that he was riding the salt bus and all that kind of stuff. And they were just being real mean to Mike, and so Mike decided to leave. If Mike heard this kind of stuff, he'd probably come on here and he would whoop everybody. He would pull out a hammer and get your kids, and you know the famous line. But with that, I hope that does answer the question, Michael. And of course, I've missed Mike Tyson as well. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support, Michael.
And there was Mike Tyson. He did show up. You found out what happened to him, and now he's gone again. So up to the next super chat, we have a $5 donation from Christian Campbell, who says, what is Ukraine's urgency to take Crimea after Kherson, and thoughts on how?
Taking Crimea after Kherson. I mean, like, that would be getting into Ukrainian war plans, and that's something we don't really like to do a lot on the stream, but I will kind of give a little bit of an outline. After they take Kherson, they'll then push through the south of the country into Crimea, and then take Crimea. So I can't really get into a lot of detail there, because if I did, I would be getting into minute, micro details like I did about the Russians. And we all saw how correct those were. Every single time I made minute, kind of like assumptions, they always turned out to be true, which was weird. And it kind of showed me that you don't have to be a professional to guess this stuff. And then even the professionals got it wrong sometimes. And so with that, Well, actually, the professionals got it wrong almost all the time, which I kind of find hilarious that they're even called professionals. But anyways, we're not going to go into that. I thank you so much for the support. I hope that kind of does answer the question in a way. But of course, we don't want to give away Ukrainian forces and what they may be doing, just in case someone important is watching. We've had important people watching before, as we found. Well, in the YouTube world, they're important, as we found out. And so I just want to make sure that just in case anyone else is watching, we're not giving away anything to them. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And we are going to move on to the next one. And thank you once again for the support.
And next up, we have a $3 super chat from Little Dickens 2, who says, "This is from our friend from South Africa."
Well, thank you very much for the support. And that is cool to hear that we have Lee Spring Army members also in South Africa. We have Lee Spring Army members on every single continent except for Antarctica. If you're from Antarctica, let us know. If you're at an Antarctic research station, I mean, because, you know, whenever I say stuff like that, there, and Matthew knows this, and I'm going to take a second to say this because it's like 5 people out there, but whenever I say anything, like if you live in Antarctica, there's going to be someone in the chat who sits there and pushes their glasses up on their nose and goes, "Well, technically no one lives in Antarctica, they're only there in a research station." And so whenever I say something like that, I have to immediately catch myself, and I already know that someone's typing that up in the comment section just to say that. So in that, if you just saw me catch myself, that's why. And I understand that everyone always wants to be correct, but at the same time, with that kind of stuff, it's like, why? You know, it's like, yo, it's like you get the picture. Obviously, no one lives in Antarctica; they stay there as a reason. Anyways, we're on to the next one.
All right, and for our final super chat of the night, until we move on to our multiple live chat questions, we have a $2 donation from Richard Harrison, who says, "Thanks for the coverage. Tea and scones from the UK."
And thank you so much for the support. It is cool to hear, once again, our UK viewers are out there and listening. We, of course, well, Matthew and me are actually pretty British, as a matter of fact. It's not like the British thing that a lot of Americans say, where they're like, oh, you know, we're like 1/8 British, you know, or something like, well, no, like 8% British. We're like 90% British, which is really weird because our family has lived in the United States for hundreds of years at this point, like around, hell, I think like 300 years. We were actually here before the United States existed. And so it's kind of weird that we're 90% British, but at the same time, it is really cool because, you know, we can kind of just be like, well, Britain's where we came from. So I thank you so much for the support. And of course, we will enjoy the tea and scones. And I hope that does address the comment. And I thank you once again for the support. And it's cool to hear that the Lee Spring Army members in Britain are out there and kicking. And so thank you once again. I hope that does address the comment. And with that, I believe we just rounded out all of our super chat questions for the night, and we're now going to move into the live chats and answer as many of those as we can. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
All right, and moving on to our live chat questions. Up first, we have a really good one from Free Falling Air, who says, "Enforcer, I know Russia and China are more frenemies than anything, but do you see China pushing for Taiwan, or has the sanctions and collective support for Ukraine slowed China's ambitions?"
I think they have slowed China's ambitions. I've gone over this one a lot, but seeing the economic sanctions levied against the Russians, if the Chinese had similar sanctions levied against them, considering they're an export economy, their economy would start shrinking at an unparalleled rate. If you go over the actual export and import figures and deficits and surpluses, it would be detrimental for them to rush up hostily against the West's intentions. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And by and large, the answer would be, I think it stymied their, I guess you could say, their goals, and they're probably not going to invade Ukraine. But then again, I was wrong with Ukraine. I thought the Russians were going to invade there, and then they did something that spelled certain economic and political suicide for them, and diplomatic suicide. And I'm not sure if the Chinese would do the same, but I feel like they have a lot more at stake for it. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next question.
And also, one more super chat that just came in. We have a $2 donation from B-Lord, who says, "Love Poland."
And B-Lord, Poland is pretty cool. And so with that, I hope that does address the comment. And of course, if you are from Poland, thank you so much for the support. And you're talking about you love Poland, Poland is pretty cool. And so with that, we are on to the next question. And thank you once again for the support.
All right, and moving on to our second live chat question, we have one from Gabby B, who says, "Do you think that if Putler keeps on getting humiliated with the war and not going the way he wants, that he would do what Hitler did and take his own life?"
Well, Hitler took his own life because he was scared of what was going to happen to him if he was captured by the Soviets, which I would have been scared of too. So I don't think Putin would kill himself unless if like the whole entire world was on the outskirts of Moscow, and even at that, they would most likely fling the nukes before he did that. So I would assume the answer to that would be no, because I don't see the Ukrainians marching on Moscow anytime soon, and so I think he would just back out of this war and maybe get exiled, maybe survive as the leader of the country until he dies. I'm not really sure, but I don't really see him killing himself. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have one more super chat from Ashley, who puts in a $10 donation and says, no question, but thank you.
Well, thank you very much for the support, Ashley. And of course, we're always appreciative of your support as well. You've been a long-time channel viewer and, of course, have helped these streams to keep running. And so thank you once again for the support. And I'm happy that you have enjoyed the stream as well tonight. And so with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you once again.
All right. And moving on to our third live chat question, we have one from Jeff Lieberman, who says, Enforcer, what is your opinion of the Apache helicopter?
It's pretty decent. Helicopters, though, are a bit of a finicky thing. They're all finicky. They're very difficult to use. I mean, like, not difficult in terms of training. They're very difficult to use in a proper situation where they're not at an immediate disadvantage. It's just hard to say they've ever really been something useful. Airborne operations that have revolved around paratroopers or helicopters are very risky from the outset. They usually have a high casualty rate. They're usually just like on the brink of being a failure or a success. And so by and large, I would have to say that the AH-64, well, helicopters as a premise are not as useful as people make them out to be, but still they're better than nothing, and they do fill those niche gaps sometimes where they are useful. So with that in mind, I would say the AH-64 is probably one of the more competent helicopters out there, but once again, helicopters in general are a little finicky and pretty niche in their usage. So with that, I hope that does answer the question. And once again, that's just my opinion. I may be wrong. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And up next, we have a live chat question from Urban Ghost Hunters, who says, I heard news out of Russia that they had moved arms and ammunition into Europe's largest nuclear power plant. Do you think that this is a setup or a typical Russian run-and-hide tactic?
Oh no, this is not a setup whatsoever. It was actually there, and the Ukrainians struck it last week and destroyed some of it. So the Russians actually had done that, and the Ukrainians apparently have managed to destroy some of it or all of it. I wasn't really able to tell, but we did see a loitering bomb hit it and then cause it to catch on fire. And so with that, I hope that does answer the question. We are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on, we have a question from Quantum Fighter, who says, Enforcer, what do you think the Russian oligarchy class are doing at this point behind the scenes? Have they turned to arms and drug smuggling, propaganda, or have they fled to live in comfort in the Middle East, or what?
It's really hard to tell. I don't really follow the oligarchs a lot. We know that at the beginning of the war, a lot of them jumped ship right then, but I don't know what's happened to all of them after that. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to plead ignorance on that one because I don't really follow the oligarchs much, and I don't know where they are right now. So with that, I hope that has answered the question, and we are going to answer 3 more questions from the chat, and then after that, we'll be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And we had one more super chat come in just a moment ago. This time we have a $5 donation from Bill Russell, who says, is Ukraine going to experience any difficulties getting the needed fuel for all the new tanks and military vehicles promised in coming into Ukraine?
That's a great question, and I don't actually have a clear answer to that. We do know that the Ukrainians are running through fuel shortages, much like countries at war do, and we haven't seen them instill any rationing right now, as far as I know, as like ration books or anything like that. It's kind of like a limit at each gas station per vehicle, which is kind of rationing in a way, but kind of not. It's kind of like quasi-rationing in a way. So I would say it may be. I don't know. We have seen Ukrainian military vehicles operating whenever we've seen them without fail, and we haven't heard any news of them having to halt a large amount of their vehicles' operations because of a lack of fuel. So I would feel like it's not a problem, but at the same time, due to the fuel shortages nationwide, it may be. It's kind of a mixed image right now, so I can't really give you a clear answer on it. But I might be leaning more towards the side of yes, based off of the current fuel shortage. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question, Bill, and thank you once again for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And next up, we have another super chat. This time we have one from Furry, who puts in a $15 donation and says Putler should already fast scroll forward of the Hitler script his all actions are based on to the last scene in the bunker. Do you agree?
Yes, I do agree. I think that might be kind of nice, actually. And so thank you so much for the support, and I thank you for putting that question in a very eloquently put way. I didn't just come out right and say it. So yes, I would agree, and I thank you so much once again for the support, Furry. I believe that's the correct way to pronounce that. And with that, we are on to the next one, and thank you once again for the support.
And a quick shout out to Susan Reichel for putting in a $5 donation. And thank you very much for your support of the channel. And moving back to our live chat questions, next up we have one from Alex Wolf, who says, how many FOABs does Russia have?
FOABs, father of all bombs. Okay.
Yes.
Father of all bombs. Let me pull that up. How many FOABs does Russia have? Forbes. Yes, that's what we're looking for. How many father of all bombs? Father of all bombs. This created equivalent to 44 tons, making it the biggest non-nuclear explosive device in the world. But how many do they have? It's a thermobaric bomb. Oh boy, the Russians are at it again. Number. Come on, where's the number? Doesn't look like we have a number. So I don't know. I mean, like, I can't really answer that question for you because it doesn't look like we have a specific number. We do have a crude drawing of this thing, and we do have a supposed picture of the thing being tested. But then again, I still think that the Moab is the actual goat here because it's painted in John Deere green, and any bomb painted in a John Deere green must be the best bomb on earth. And so I hope that answers the question. We really don't have an answer to it. And with that, we're going to answer 2 more questions from the chat, and then we're going to round out tonight's stream.
And next up, we have a question from Richard Harrison, who says, do you believe that if Russian forces are pushed entirely from the southeast of Ukraine, will the DPR and LPR want to claim independence from Ukraine and ally with Russia?
Can you reread that one again?
Yeah. So Richard said, do you believe that if Russian forces are pushed entirely from the southeast of Ukraine, will the DPR and LPR want to claim independence from Ukraine and ally with Russia?
I don't think so, because the Ukrainians had pushed so far southeast that they had pushed the Russians out of that area. The DPR and LPR would not exist to declare independence or do anything for that matter. They would be occupied once again by the Ukrainians, and they would begin the process of reintegrating back into the country. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. Hopefully I didn't misunderstand that. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who was the lucky last person who threw in that lucky last question?
All right, so the last question of the night comes from Herp Derp NV, who says, Enforcer, where did you get the name Enforcer in the beginning?
An excellent question, and so I must begin the long story of explaining. So for a while, I actually had a gaming name called Captain Something 11, and so if you see that name, if you see anything with Captain Something 11 in War Thunder, that's me. That name lasted for a long time, but once I started to grow up, it started to seem like a kind of silly name, and so I started looking for a new gaming tag name. And so the one I came up with for Steam was the Enforcer, because it sounded cool, and I thought, hey, that's a cool name. Didn't really have anything to do with, like, you know, I've seen some people asking me, like, what, is that like a thing for Star Wars or for the cops? It had nothing to do with that. I just thought it sounded cool, so I came up with that name. So I used that name as the name for all of my gaming stuff after a while, and this channel actually started off as a channel called Think Tank. And after those 2 videos that I made with the account named Think Tank failed, I then switched to being a gaming channel and called myself the Enforcer. And so after a while of doing gaming videos and, you know, just doing that, I went into Ukraine war streaming, and the channel blew up, but it still had the gaming channel name. And so I kind of had a debate for a bit. Should I change the channel name, or should I not? And then I finally decided not to. I said, If people enjoy my content, they are going to enjoy it regardless of the name of my channel. And so I'm just going to keep it as the Enforcer. And so that's why this channel is called the Enforcer, is because it's kind of a carryover from it being a gaming channel. And also it's what I'm called on Steam and all of my gamer tags pretty much at this point. And so with that, I hope that does answer your question. It's not really as like convoluted or deeply thought out as one would think. It's just my video game name on Steam. And so with that, I hope that does answer.
Also, Enforcer, real quick, from that super chat that Susan Reichel sent in earlier, she actually meant to attach a question to it, and she said, "Enforcer, look at the Javelin missile song video."
We will make sure to look into it. I don't know if we can look into it on stream because of time constraints right now. We are at 2 hours and 50 minutes. It's getting close to marathon length. But I will make sure to check it out off stream, and we may, if it's not copyrighted, might include that as one of the songs in our countdown in the future. So with that, thank you so much for the support once again, Rachel. I'm glad that we were able to circle around and get that one answered. And with that, I hope y'all have enjoyed tonight's stream. And I hope I've answered all of y'all's questions fairly well. It's been a lot of fun to, of course, cover the news and answer everyone's questions. Of course, we've had some funny moments tonight, and also a bunch of interesting questions, and I hope y'all have enjoyed it as much as me. It's once again been an honor to report the news to y'all of day 148, the first day of week 22, and I hope that we are able to continue covering this news until the war ends. Once again, if you are new to the stream, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It helps us out a whole load, and liking this stream helps us to reach more people, and replaying the stream also helps us to reach more people as well, because it shows that we're getting a long play time out of people watching, which YouTube likes for some reason. And so with that, thank you all once again. It's been a complete pleasure, and I will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the day 149 news, which will only have us one day away from the 150th day of the war and the beginning of the 6th month. Thank you all once again, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Take care and have a great night.